Chapter 1939. In the void battlefield of Sunset Peak, bodies were falling one after another. Noble Renhuangs and rare Imperial Path cultivators were all as worthless as ant. Muyue and Xinyue saw Qingqing fall into the foothills. Although he suffered a heavy blow, he was still breathing and would not die. Sun Luo. The servant shouted angrily at the general of Qin Imperial City who attacked. He said to Muyue anxiously, "Mistress, General Xinyue, quickly go and help General Zhan Lang and General Yufeng. They are no match for the great Empress. I will deal with this person." After that, the servant pounced on the general who had injured Qingqing. He had once transformed into the Eastern Sea Monarch. Among the impeccable subordinates of great Empress Ling Xian, other than the black and white protectors and the first general, the servant's cultivation was slightly higher than the others. Therefore, it was not surprising that he would deal with Sun Luo. "Let's go." Muyue and Xinyue looked at each other and rushed to the huge throne with their swords. "Friend, I will leave this to you." The Phoenix clan ancestor was surrounded by raging flames. His sharp eyes stared at the top of the sky. There, Dendi was fighting with the evil god of divine wilderness. Sister Muri was in such a miserable state because of the evil god. The Phoenix clan ancestor wanted to take revenge. "Go," the Tao ancestor replied. The other party did not need to worry. The situation was getting more and more favorable for the alliance of the North. The Phoenix clan ancestor nodded. Under the raging flames, he transformed into a huge divine phoenix and flew to the edge of the sky. Roar! A deafening roar swept over from one side of the battlefield. Tao ancestor looked over and saw that the ape ancestor's body was completely wrapped up by thick and strong branches. They were stacked layer after layer, densely packed and tightly bound. The sharp branches pierced through the golden ape's solid skin and pierced deep into its flesh. The emerald light of the nomological particles was injected into its body. The ape ancestor let out an earth-shattering roar. In front of ancestor ape, Valley Lord Shennong turned into an ancient tree. Countless dragon-like branches swept forward and wrapped around ancestor ape. It was as if the ancient tree had opened countless arms to hug him tightly. At the same time, among the giants worshipped by the four barbarians, the most muscular one held a mountain-shaped stone knife in his hand and cut into the chest of the ape ancestor through the gaps between the branches and leaves. The ape ancestor's roar was particularly intense. Its huge body struggled wildly, and the power that erupted was extremely terrifying. It forcibly tore apart the branches all over its body and broke free from the shackles of the Lord of Divine Farmer Valley. Its fist blasted forward and penetrated the trunk of the ancient tree. As the bark flew all over the sky, it completely penetrated the Taoist body of the Lord of Divine Farmer Valley. "Ah!" A tragic cry reverberated as the ancient tree shrank. Valley Master Shennong's tattered body fell from the battlefield and lost all signs of life. The ape ancestor had completely smashed his internal organs into powder. However, when Valley Lord Shennong fell, a figure jumped out from behind him, holding a shiny black rod in his hand. Tsingang roared and struck out more than 1,000 rod shadows. They overlapped and condensed into a terrifying attack, smashing down on ancestor ape's head. Bang! The sky-shaking rod fell, and a rain of blood splashed from ancestor ape's head. The golden hair on his body suddenly lost its luster. He let go of the lava rod in his hand, and his mountain-like body fell from the sky to the ground. Bastard! The great elder's eyes were red. The yin and yang Tao light emerged from the soles of his feet and radiated hundreds of feet. He raised his hand and a vast palm print pressed down on Tsingang and the ugly giant. The giant was not the ancestor of the four barbarians, but the ancient Bhikkhu tribe. Because it was born tall and ugly, it was abandoned by the world. The people of the East Continent hated and feared it, but they were quite close to the four barbarians. This battle was for the four barbarians. Boom! The yin and yang Dao light alternated like two swimming fish, crushing all the way. Sun Gang did not dare to take the attack of the unblemished Great Elder. Under the suppression of the Great Elder's Emperor's will, he did not even have time to escape. He could only try to hide behind the Bhikkhu giant to save his life. The largest Bhikkhu Cyclops spat out white foam from its mouth and threw out the stone saber in its hand. It spun in the air and collided with the Tao ancestor's bipolar palm might. However, the stone saber immediately shattered and the palm light still pressed down and imprinted on the body of the Bhikkhu giant. Rumble! Terrifying shock waves spread out, and the giant's body was torn apart. Its flesh and blood melted under the Great Elder's rules. Sun Gang, who was hiding behind, was also affected. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and half of his armor was broken. He was thrown back thousands of feet. He escaped death and did not dare to stay for a moment longer. He desperately fled in the opposite direction of the Great Elder. Roar! Another ape roar sounded, and it was extremely tragic. Following the fall of Ancestor Ape, not far away, another giant ape fell and was torn apart by the Bhikkhu giant. Apes retreat, the Great Elder roared. The Great Elder roared, and the yin-yang Tao light under his feet continued to spread, expanding to thousands of feet. The flawless Tao will and the heavenly path converged, and beams of turbulent light flowed toward his body. His figure became more and more majestic and dazzling, standing there like a god. This was a big move. As the vanguard, the golden apes suffered more and more casualties. There were not many of them to begin with, and if they continued to fight, their foundation would be damaged. Although the North Territory Alliance Army had the advantage of numbers in this battle, they could not ignore the casualties of the giant ape. Retreat, retreat. Seeing that the Great Elder's pressure was getting stronger and stronger, and that Tao will radiated thousands of feet, among the many giant apes, Sand ordered the other giant apes to retreat. At this time, many giant apes, who were riddled with scars, grabbed their rods, and took large strides toward the road they came from. Only a ferocious wild ape, whose size was second only to the ancestor ape, did not give up. He struck out with his rod and crushed a large number of 4 barbarians on the battlefield. Only then did he leave crying. That was Sand's father, the son of the ancestor ape. The ancient divine war did not annihilate all of you. Today I'm here to send you off. The Great Elder raised his finger to the sky. Above him, a yin-yang emblem expanded, and countless thunderbolts swam. He pointed his finger forward, and the yin-yang light that shrouded thousands of feet of space flew out and landed on the battlefield where the giant apes retreated. Boom! The heavens and earth trembled, and the terrifying thunderbolts wreaked havoc. The Bhikkhu giants scrambled out before the might of the Tao could crush them. They didn't care about the Empress warriors beside them and trampled Han Lingxuan's personal troops into meat patties. Unfortunately, the Tao might of thunder wrapped around them, and they still could not escape the fate of death. Their bodies were paralyzed, and they could not move their limbs. They could only watch as the terrifying yin-yang aurora fell from the sky, and it was like a giant pot lid had completely merged the world. Boom! The figures of the Bhikkhu giants disappeared. In this area, thousands of the Empress' personal troops, who were at the Renhuang level, were annihilated. Without the restraint of the powerhouses of the same level, the Great Elder could be said to be an existence that could destroy heaven and earth. His palm strike had annihilated all the Bhikkhu giant. In the North Territory Alliance Army, the disciples of various orthodoxies were dumbfounded. They looked at the empty battlefield, and their eyes were filled with shock. This was flawless. Chapter 1940. The Tao ancestor breathed heavily, and beads of sweat flowed down his slightly pale face. His strong facial features looked tired. Releasing a large-scale spell attack caused his body to tremble for a while. Bury the Pichu giant. The demonic beasts of the Ape Island and the Medicine Valley will work with the disciples of the Phoenix Flower 9 lineages to suppress the battlefield. The rest will depend on the Phoenix God clan and the army of the southern region to defeat the remaining 4 barbarians. A faint smile appeared on his tired face. The battle was getting clearer. Uncle Zhang knew that his body was trembling because he had used too much will. He slowly moved back. Bang! 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 Fists and palms collided. Particles of fighting will and evil qi clashed. Zhan Wu and Kuei Han flew over countless people's heads. The battle was extremely violent. Kuei Han had reached the unblemished great accomplishment. He was strengthened by the evil power of the evil soul. His attacks carried the precept. Among the unblemished great emperors, no one could defeat him except for Zhan Wu. Zhan Wu had dissipated his divine source and fell into a mortal body. He cultivated back to the unblemished great emperor. When he put on the King of God's armor and merged with the old Zhan Wu's will, he had surpassed the unblemished great emperor. Just like Showuk, he was close to nirvana. Even so, there was still a difference in strength between the two. Wuk had refined the shadow sword spirit, but he was still an ordinary great emperor under the heavenly path. No matter how strong he was still a mortal. The scripture of unblemished battle was the supreme technique of war god Siddhi in the Archean realm. Like the art of endless samsara, it carried the precept's attribute. Zhan Wu's actual combat power was definitely much stronger than Wuk's. Under the precepts, the rules were ineffective. I've been waiting for this day for a long time. I even dreamed of fighting you. Kuei Han's body was filled with rolling thunder. Every punch he threw would set off a terrifying evil qi. The evil power came from the countless generations of disciples of the Divine Palace and the will of the old Peak Master. It took the root of all spirits and merged it into a new power. The evil power had no attribute. It almost included all the attributes in the world. When it reached the great emperor level, it advanced to the precepts that surpassed precept. Ordinary great emperors couldn't compete with the evil power. They would be devoured when they encountered it. Unfortunately, Kuei Han only had one arm that could use the evil power. If he took too much, his body would collapse and he would be devoured by the evil soul. I knew that you were wild and hard to tame, but I didn't expect you to become a mad dog in the end. Zhan Wu was not afraid of the evil light on Kuei Han's fist at all. Under the surging battle intent particles, his monarch body was almost indestructible. His eyes turned pure gold. Under the circulation of the honest battle scripture, the Tao will that erupted from the sunset battle god increased steadily. He abandoned his 6 senses and 9 senses, as well as his vision, and the images reflected in his mind became clearer. Boom! Zhan Wu threw a punch forward. The faint light of the 9 realms of martial arts surrounded his body. Zhan Wu's aura changed qualitatively. Kuei Han roared in a thunderous voice. Inside his body, the rule of thunder surged like a raging ocean, gathering in his right arm as he clashed head-on with Zhan Wu. Kuei Han's body trembled as he felt that his blood was about to evaporate. Without the protection of the evil power, this punch would have crippled his right arm. Tasteless and soundless, Zhan Wu chanted. Under the support of the honest battle scripture, the divine king armor became more and more dazzling. He threw another punch forward. Kuei Han straightened his body to receive the attack, but he felt as if he was hit by a mountain and was sent flying. Compared to Qin Hao, your evil power is not enough. Zhan Wu's voice was extremely calm, without any trace of emotion. It could even be said that Kuei Han's Dharma power was not even comparable to Qin Hao's. After all, when the old Zhan Wu fought with Denda's Dharma power, Zhan Wu hid in the void crack and watched carefully. The Dharma power was stronger than Kuei Han. Nonsense, Kuei Han said angrily. Kuei Han shouted angrily. His hair stood straight up as if his hair was about to explode. Because of the power of thunder, his body was way too violent. Thunderbolts were sizzling out of his pores. From a distance, Kuei Han's muscular body seemed to have turned into a dazzling thunderbolt. Roar! A blinding ball of lightning shot forward from his mouth. The evil spirit wrapped around his arm let out an ear-piercing shriek. Traces of evil power gathered in the ball of lightning and shot towards the sunset battle god. Following this, the evil spirit became slightly dimmer. Senseless and colorless. Zhan Wu once again abandoned his two senses. No matter how dazzling the light was, it couldn't affect him. Moreover, he couldn't even feel the will of Kuei Han's Tao. He had entered a state where the four elements were all empty. Only his will to fight was present. Buzz. The light of particles created a huge storm that wrapped around Zhan Wu's godlike body. The terrifying lightning that gathered the evil power struck down. It started to spin uncontrollably with the storm and gradually disappeared in the light of particles. You still don't understand what the sunset battle god is. Boom. The storm disintegrated, and a figure dashed forward, moving as fast as a flash of light. Zhan Wu spread his fingers and grabbed Kuei Han's throat, forcefully squeezing the will of thunder in his opponent's mouth back into his throat. Following a series of devastating explosions, Zhan Wu flew across Kuei Han's body while holding him by the neck. Everywhere he went, surging thunderbolts radiated wildly. Not only were there thunderbolts from Kuei Han, but there were also thunderbolts that swept out from Zhan Wu's body. In an instant, a passage was opened up on the battlefield. Regardless of whether it was the disciples of the various orthodoxies, the Empress' personal army, or even the demonic beasts along the way, all of them disappeared. Zhan Wu, who had severed one of his souls, did not have any emotions. He would not pity anyone. Why? Kuei Han's painful scream spread like a gust of wind as he flew past. He had been chasing after Zhan Wu his whole life, longing to challenge the sunset battle god. Today, he finally got it. However, even with the evil power bestowed by the evil soul, he was still powerless against Zhan Wu's attacks. Kuei Han had thought of death. He had thought of countless ways to die at the hands of the sunset battle god. The most ideal one was to fight Zhan Wu to a standstill and lose in a bitter battle. However, he had never imagined that he would be picked up like a little chick by the sunset battle god, tossed around, and trampled on wantonly. A god is a god after all. You can challenge a god, but remember, don't rebel in your next life. Zhan Wu slowly spat out two words, no thoughts. No. Kuei Han screamed hoarsely. The evil spirit on his right arm, which had become extremely thin, flew out, transforming into an evil beam of light and flying to the top of the sky. However, as all the particles exploded in the sky, an extremely bright light covered half of the sky, as if a meteor had exploded. When the light spread out, Kuei Han's eyes widened. Only one figure was left standing in the void in this part of the world. You want to defeat a god with just an evil soul? Is Kuei Han too crazy, or is the evil god looking down on me? Zhan Wu retracted his empty palm. As Kuei Han's annihilation battle intent exploded, he slowly raised his head and looked up. The evil soul that had escaped after being hit by the battle intent gradually split apart and turned into nothingness. If Kuei Han still had a remnant soul left, he might think that he was a joke. Chapter 1941. At the edge of the divine wilderness Tao world, Qin Hao and the evil soul fought fiercely. Dragons roared and evil spirits danced wildly. He had left a wisp of evil spirit for Kuei Han, so he knew that Kuei Han had died at the hands of the sunset battle god. However, the evil soul didn't care. No matter what, it was impossible for a mortal from the lower world to defeat a cultivator from the upper world. Emperors were no exception. His purpose in doing so was to delay. In this battle, he had to face either Qin Hao or the sunset battle god. Between the two, killing Qin Hao and taking back the body was definitely more cost-effective than fighting Zhan Wu. Once he took back the body, the evil spirit and the physical body would become one, and the will of Tao would be even stronger. Only Qin Hao's body could support him to unleash an even more shocking evil power. At that time, he could kill the sunset battle god from the upper world with a wave of his hand. The only flaw was that Kuei Han was too weak and didn't give him enough time. He was killed so easily by Zhan Wu. He was a piece of trash from the Sunset Peak. However, the impact wasn't too great. The sunset battle god wouldn't be able to rush over for a while. After all, he still had a backup plan. At this moment, while the evil soul and Qin Hao were fighting fiercely, his consciousness sensed a wave of Emperor Qi rapidly approaching them from below. He glanced down briefly and saw a huge phantom of a divine phoenix soaring into the sky, carrying with it an astonishing amount of Tao flame energy. "You don't know what's good for you," the evil soul sneered, recognizing the Phoenix Divine Clan Patriarch. The Phoenix Divine Clan Patriarch's cultivation was at the unblemished realm. As a descendant of the primordial spirit 14 gods, he was indeed stronger than other unblemished great emperors. However, he dared to come here without knowing the battle here. Could an unblemished great emperor intervene? Swoosh! Swoosh! In the battle at Sunset Peak, beams of blinding divine light flew forward and blasted towards an Emperor Tao cultivator who was covered in lightning. In this area, the second Hallmaster of the Hall of Judgment, Xing Yu, and the first Hallmaster, Lei Ju, were engaged in a law battle. Since returning from the burial god ruins, Xing Yu's cultivation had improved a lot. He had reached the realm of true self. However, he didn't expect the first palace master Lei Ju to also improve his cultivation, from emperor to true self great emperor. In this battle, the two could be said to be evenly matched. At that moment, Xing Yu stood at one end, his palace robes rustling. Dazzling holy light continued to fly out from his hands. As the will of the great path increased, the light became denser and sharper. Lei Ju, the lord of the great hall, was surrounded by raging lightning. The will of the great path evolved into a dazzling lightning net that sealed his body within. Beams of divine light pierced through and shook the lightning net, but they were unable to break through the barrier of lightning. Moreover, First Hall Master Lei Ju's expression was even more relaxed than Xing Yu's. "Xing Yu, you and I have known each other for hundreds of years. We worked together to establish the orthodoxy of the Judgment Hall. Both of us know the hardships involved. Why don't you make me your enemy today?" Lei Ju said. "Since our paths are different, we cannot work together. Rather than watching you die in the hands of others, why don't I personally bury you? I won't let down our friendship," Holy Praise harshly said. His forehead was covered with sweat, and his eyes were filled with struggle and disappointment. Thinking back to the scenes from back then, how could he not want to reconcile with them? However, there was no turning back. Lei Ju's path deviated from their original intention. The moment they split the Judgment Hall, Holy Praise felt betrayed. "You make it sound nice. You say you won't let down our friendship, but now you want to kill me. In fact, you have long wanted to take control of the orthodoxy. Now that you've made your move, you'll be the only person at the helm of the Judgment Hall. You'll become the lord respected by the people of Zhongzhou State." Lei Ju sneered indifferently. "You!" Holy Praise spurted a mouthful of blood out of his body. His body trembled frequently, and his breath was unstable. Even the will of the great path had weakened. "I've warned you clearly, don't appear in front of me in this battle. Since you don't want to let down our friendship, then die peacefully in my hands." Lei Ju roared. The lightning around him shone brightly, and the majestic will of the great path swept out. The power that he had been accumulating all this time burst out at this moment. Boom! The lightning net broke. The terrifying lightning overturned like a tide, and instantly drowned the unstable Holy Praise in a sea of lightning. A huge roar came out, and the power that contained the will of the great path of lightning struck Holy Praise's imperial body. His palace robe was torn, and his flesh was torn apart. He was instantly reduced to a bloody man. When the last roar burst out, Holy Praise was shaken out of the raging lightning. Affected by the rules, He could not stop flying and fell diagonally to the bottom of Sunset Peak. Ha ha! Lei Ju looked at his opponent. He raised his hand and condensed a thunder axe. He did not hesitate to throw it out coldly. It was like a bolt of lightning from the sky. Die. Let holy praise die completely. Boom, crack. Furious lightning fell from the sky, but it did not strike the second palace master. A strong body flew past, brushing past the thunder axe and knocking into the holy praise. Under the attack, blood sprayed out, and a foot-long wound was torn open on the back of the Thunder Jiao, causing blood and flesh to swirl. Traitor! Lei Ju cursed loudly. His hands danced wildly above his head. As the will of the great path rolled, thunder power filled the sky. Fierce light twisted and blasted toward the Thunder Dragon. Thunder Dragon, don't show mercy. Kill him. Holy praise spat out blood as he fell. He was soft-hearted, and that was why Lei Ju took advantage of him. The Thunder Dragon looked at the figure of his master, who stood above the 9 heavens. His face was majestic and filled with a natural sense of suppression. This feeling was imprinted in the Thunder Dragon's bones. He could not resist and had to be in awe. Traces of thunder power began to appear on the Thunder Dragon's body, mixed with wisps of holy light. The two will of the great path intertwined. In an instant, the dazzling brilliance formed a thunder diagram, blocking the Thunder Dragon's head. Defense. Even though he had stepped into the Emperor's path of truth and was at the same level as his master, he still could not make up his mind to kill. Crack, crack, crack. Dense thunder radiance blasted down. Lei Ju would not show mercy to the Thunder Dragon. In his eyes, it was as if the Thunder Dragon was not his disciple at all. However, at this moment, an unfamiliar palm suddenly pierced through the battlefield, radiating a terrifying light of particles. There was no way to describe the strength of this palm. It felt like the hand of a god-king, capable of suppressing everything the moment it appeared. Bang! Zhan Wu flipped his hand, and the fighting wool particles filled the sky. The falling thunder light was like the Milky Way, flowing back to where it came from. Accompanied by a violent explosion, all of it blasted back to Lei Ju. The latter's body shook, and blood spurted out of his mouth. Whoosh! Zhan Wu pointed again. The fighting wool particles formed a beam of dazzling light of the god of war, penetrating the void and spinning upward. Lei Ju stood there, his face pale with fright. He could not care about anything else. He turned over and drilled into the crowd of the Empress's personal army. At the same time, he threw down 3 broken fingers from the air. How many times do I have to say it? If you can't see clearly with your eyes, use the way of thunder to blast it. Today is the last time I will say it to you. Above the Thunder Dragon, Zhan Wu, whose back was facing him, warned him sternly. The Thunder Dragon's body trembled violently, and the expression on his face gradually changed. This voice, this tone, and the familiar silhouette of the back. Boom! An incomparably intense light of the Thunder Dao erupted from the Thunder Jiao's body. At this moment, his aura was earth-shattering. The figure of the war god standing above his head was like a divine lamp, illuminating all the confusion in his heart. He had never seen it so clearly before. Due to the excitement in his eyes, the Thunder Flood Dragon roared the first palace master's name and flew past the sunset battle god. Like an enraged Thunder Dragon, it chased after Lei Ju, who had entered the sea of people, with a trail of holy light and lightning. Master? He didn't know what Lei Ju's identity was. Perhaps he really was the first lord of the Judgment Palace, but the Thunder Dragon was sure that he wasn't the master who had taught him the way of thunder. He had never been as excited as he was today. His hot tears made him want to howl. He exuded pride. He never thought that the Sunset Battle God, whose name shook the 5 realms of the East Continent, was the master who had taught him the way of thunder. Perhaps the Sunset Battle God didn't even have a disciple in his heart. During that period of time, he might have casually taught someone something. However, the Thunder Dragon was satisfied. Even the ants of the lower world have their own glory. Zhan Wu looked at the Thunder Dragon, who was simply unstoppable. The Sunset Battle God, who had lost one of his souls, smiled inexplicably, even though this smile didn't contain any emotion. His eyes were dazzling as he looked at the vast battlefield. The unblemished emperors of the Qin imperial city had lost a few generals. This directly caused the scales of victory to tilt towards the alliance army of the north. Han Lingxian was besieged by Zhan Lang, Mu Yue, and the others. Although they were in a stalemate, Empress Lingxian was unable to command the army. Other than Qin Hao's battle, which he didn't know the final result, Zhan Wu already had a premonition that they would win this battle. As for Lei Ju, Zhan Wu's emperor intent radiated outwards. He tried to search through the way of Dao, but he couldn't lock onto the First Lord's position. It was probably because the Emperor Dao's aura was too chaotic. Before he returned to his god true body, Zhan Wu would be affected. However, Lei Ju, who was merely in the true self realm, was able to dodge Zhan Wu's nirvana killing technique. That was the fastest and fiercest golden finger of the Pill Venerate clan. Lei Ju's performance made Zhan Wu faintly uneasy. "Tell me your name." Far away from the setting sun peak battlefield, Showuk's entire body was overflowing with sword intent. The dazzling sword light surrounding his body made him look like a world-suppressing divine sword that could suppress the world. However, his opponents were extremely powerful. Even though Showuk had merged with the Juying Sword Emperor's sword soul and controlled the myriad sword intent, he still couldn't gain an advantage over his opponents. Qin Emperor City's #1 general, Tian Dou. In front of the true extreme sword master, a handsome young general with a well-proportioned body spoke. He wore a set of white armor and a long cape that trailed behind him. He exuded an extremely outstanding aura. White armor and white robes, handsome features, and outstanding strength among the unblemished emperors. It was hard for Showuk not to remember such a person. Also, let me tell you, Tai Hui is my younger brother. The true extreme sword master's head is mine. A gentle smile appeared on Tiandou's handsome face. Thinking of Emperor Tai Hui, he really was a troublemaker. Emperor Tai Hui was trapped by the true extreme sword master's sword Dao devil barrier. He hadn't won a single battle for decades. If he didn't kill Showuk today, Tian Dou was worried that Tai Hui wouldn't be able to improve his cultivation level. Chapter 1942. You can't take my head. Wuk said indifferently. Sword will float around him, and a row of golden sword formations appeared in front of him. Each sword was pointed at the first general of the Qin imperial city. Tian Dou had a smile on his face. He rolled up his white robe and flung it out. Dazzling battle spears surrounded his body. In an instant, the sword light flashed across the space between the two of them. The battle spears pierced through the air, and an unparalleled attack erupted. At this moment, Qin Hao dispersed the evil power and changed into his dragon form to fight with Evil God for the second time. His fist, which was suffused with the brilliance of the nomological particles, blasted out. Fists of light were like flaming dragons flying horizontally. Especially when the 9 palace acupoints were opened and the battle path body was forged, the explosive nirvana power swept and spread. The edge of the path world was shaken and rippled. Even the seal set by Yen Ming was glowing strongly. Your explosive power in this state is very strong. Unfortunately, you can only maintain it for a limited time. Eastern Sky, the evil god, retreated in order to advance. He dragged along the dancing evil spirits and avoided a direct confrontation with Qin Hao. Just now, out of curiosity, in order to feel Yen Ming's emperor soul and the ancient divine technique, the indestructible samsara art, he activated a wisp of evil power to try and see how powerful the human dragon was. In the end, it was torn apart by Qin Hao's fist light. as expected of someone who gave the 14 gods of the origin spirit a headache. Although Yen Ming had left the divine wilderness, he had left behind a wisp of divine Tao power to seal his essence blood in a divine artifact. Coincidentally, it had created a monster like Qin Hao. Fortunately, Qin Hao had not completely mastered the laws. Once he stepped into the true divine Tao, the evil god would not be able to withstand it. Qin Hao's sweat gradually seeped through the gaps between his scales. He felt the power in his fist gradually weaken. The evil god had guessed correctly. Before stepping into the true divine Tao, even if he entered the Nirvana Emperor path, he would not be able to maintain the human dragon's power for long. He was delaying and waiting. Try your best to delay the evil soul until Zhan Wu and Zhou Wudao arrive. At this time, the huge phantom of the phoenix divine bird let out a cry and flew down from the sky with raging flames. As the phantom of the phoenix divine bird bloomed with radiance, an old and domineering figure suddenly appeared. The Phoenix clan ancestor did not say anything and directly jumped into the formation to pounce on the evil soul. The evil soul glanced indifferently at the Phoenix clan ancestor. It had already sensed the Phoenix clan ancestor's arrival with its mind. It waved its hand and sent out a beam of extremely evil energy. That ugly evil spirit with a human face dragged a trail of ghostly smoke towards the Phoenix clan ancestor. Under the laws, the rules were ineffective. The evil god had accumulated the resentment of powerhouses for tens of thousands of years. His evil will had been tempered to the extreme. In his opinion, even the Phoenix ancestor, a descendant of the Phoenix god, would not be able to withstand it. Unexpectedly, the flames in the Phoenix clan ancestor's hand swirled, and a sword appeared out of thin air. This sword blade was filled with an intense divine pressure, and its sharpness was extremely terrifying. It was obviously not an ordinary sword. The Phoenix clan ancestor gripped the sword with both hands and let out a roar as he slashed at the evil spirit with bloodshot eyes. The blade that was suffused with the radiance of divine will tore the evil spirit apart from the middle, cutting it all the way from head to tail before finally landing on the evil god's body. Ah! A painful cry rang out. It was hard to imagine that it came from the mouth of the nearly indestructible evil soul. The disguised soul desperately retreated, but its reaction was also extremely fast. The moment the phoenix sword tore a hole in the evil soul's body, it frantically retreated. However, the hole in its arm did not close again. Wisps of evil energy continuously poured out of the crack that was suffused with traces of fire, as if countless souls were crawling out. Divine weapon! The evil soul's expression finally changed. It looked at the Phoenix clan ancestor with an especially serious gaze, firmly staring at the sword that had cut it. If the fragmented image in its memory was not wrong, that should be the divine weapon of the Phoenix god, the Phoenix divine cry. Ha 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 ha! The Phoenix clan ancestor laughed wildly. You didn't expect this, did you? Although the gods are dead, this mortal world has perfectly preserved the divine weapon of the Phoenix god. His face was filled with supreme glory, and his eyes were filled with extreme hatred. The Phoenix clan ancestor stared fiercely at the evil soul Eastern Sky's face with a twisted expression, wanting nothing more than to cut it into countless pieces. When he was young, he was not eye-catching in the clan. The Phoenix clan had always respected strength, and strength was the only way to stay in the clan. Muri had never looked down on him, and as the proud daughter of the god race, she had taken care of his family many times. His mother's body was weak, and at that time, Muri's care was no different from half a mother to a child. This damned evil soul had destroyed Muri's emperor's path, and not even her body was left behind. 10,000 deaths were not enough to atone for his sins. The old man's emotions are so intense, it seems he hates the evil soul even more than I do. Qin Hao was a little confused, but that was not important. The Phoenix clan ancestor had rushed over like a hothead, so he definitely had something to rely on, which was why Denda did not stop him just now. It turned out that the Phoenix clan ancestor's trump card was a divine weapon. How many times had this happened already? After a short moment of absent-mindedness, the Phoenix clan ancestor in his divine robe held the Phoenix divine cry in his hand and slashed at the evil soul again. Qin Hao shook his head slightly. The old man had the protection of a divine weapon, but how could he lose his mind? However, it was more or less a help. Immediately, Qin Hao moved again and began to attack the evil soul of the divine wilderness with the Phoenix clan ancestor. Rumble! Roar! The demon army pushed forward, following the instructions of the dog spirit, Jiao Ying, Peacock Demon King, and the demon emperors. The Sea of Beasts divided the Empress' personal army into several groups, and began to eliminate them one by one with the help of the 9 lineages of the Phoenix. In the central region, in front of the Empress, although the 4 barbarian army fought fiercely, they were alone in the face of the siege of the Phoenix clan and the southern region Li clan elite. Especially after the Dao ancestor destroyed the Pichu giants, the 4 barbarian army was in danger, and there were signs of collapse. However, at this time, an unforeseen event happened. About 24 barbarian shamans in wizard robes appeared in the center of the front line, and a group of people stood together in a circle, chanting incantations at the same time. Strings of ancient gray runes floated out, and their bodies emanated astonishing power. Buzz! A pillar of light burst out from the ring formed by the crowd. Waves of evil aura rolled out from the center of the ring and condensed into an incomparably huge evil spirit. This evil spirit was clad in ancient armor. It actually stepped out from the encirclement of the Phoenix god race and Li clan's elite. It stomped down with its feet that were as majestic as a mountain. One by one, the god race warriors and Li clan's elites disappeared, leaving behind a trail of footprints. The evil soul carried a monstrous evil wind that flipped Empress Jingji's chariot, and it ran out, tearing a huge gap in the circle formed by the warriors. This was not the end. After the evil soul appeared, it began to counterattack the 9 lineages of the Phoenix according to the will of the shamans in the formation. The heavenly arm with disgusting liquid flowing down it waved, and it swept in the direction of Lord Wu Huang and his disciples. A gust of bloody wind swept across, and the 6th island of Phoenix Flower, from the island lords to the elders and disciples, all evaporated into thin air, leaving not a single drop of blood behind. Wu Huang. Supremacy Feng Lan looked at the empty space, and her face was filled with shock. All the orthodoxies who participated in the battle were shocked. What kind of power was this? It wiped out the entire Phoenix Flower lineage in one blow. This is the ancient curse passed down by the barbarian god. Don't gather together, spread out, quickly spread out. Empress Jingji climbed out from under the broken chariot. Only half of the chariot built by the Phoenix clan was left after being swept by the evil wind, and the fire feather armor on her body had also lost its luster. The fire feather was the life feather of the Phoenix clan, and it was related to the strength of life force and Tao will. It was obvious that Empress Jingji was severely injured. Retreat. Dark blue, lark, whisper, all lineages, retreat. Feng Lan shouted loudly, and the sacred item, Dream Branch, in her hand shone brightly. An invisible force was injected into Phoenix Flower Supremacy's body, and the spiritual qi between heaven and earth began to gather crazily towards the imperial sword in her hand. She slashed out with her sword, and a blazing, flaming divine phoenix appeared. It opened its sharp claws and pounced on the giant evil soul. At this moment, the light of the curse that erupted from the shamans at the core of the barbarian formation became even more intense. Their bodies gradually became shriveled, and their ugly faces became even uglier and older as their life force was drained away. However, they had exchanged for more power for the evil soul. Boom! A terrifying fist aura pierced through the sky, and before the heavenly phoenix sword will could fall, the evil soul pierced through Feng Lan's Tao will. A rain of fire fell from the sky, and Feng Lan seemed to have been punched. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body was on the verge of collapse. Supremacy! The island masters and elders of the various lineages were shocked. With the Dream Branch, Fong Lan could control the power of the North and gather it into one body. Her cultivation was comparable to an unblemished Great Master, but she was no match for the curse cast by the shamans from the barbarian formation. That's not an ordinary curse. It's an ancient life-burning technique, and it's very powerful. Also, the curse power gathered is not ordinary. At the back of the North Territory Alliance army, Muri, who only had her Emperor's soul floating, looked at the injured Fong Lan. Just by sensing the aura, one could tell that it was evil power that could destroy a pseudo-unblemished Great Master. However, the evil power gathered by the shaman's curse was not of the same origin as the evil god of the divine wilderness. Otherwise, Fong Lan was already dead. The evil power of the evil soul could fight against the laws. If it attacked with its power, not only Fong Lan, no unblemished Great Master could withstand it. Except for that person. Boom! The light filled with battle-intent particles descended in front of the giant evil spirit. The Sunset War God, the master of the Sunset Peak, pressed down with his 5 fingers. Under the cover of Path Will, the palm light spanned across hundreds of acres and turned into a swirling current. It suddenly clasped the evil spirit's head. In the next moment, at the core of the barbarian formation, the shamans who cast the ancient curse all trembled violently. Blood flowed from the corners of their mouths. However, they did not fall down. Instead, they straightened their backs and put up a strong resistance. The turbulent vibration reverberated, and Zhan Wu retreated. The art of honest combat's palm gave up the 5 senses. Even Kuei Han could not withstand it and did not crush the evil spirit. I'll hold the evil spirit back. You guys rush in and kill them. Zhan Wu floated toward the evil spirit and pointed at the shamans at the core of the barbarian formation. No matter how lowly the ants in the lower world were, they still had strong belief. The shamans did not care about life and death. If they lost this battle, they knew very well that there would be no more barbarians in the world. For the survival of their race, they had to give it their all. Hurry up and break the formation! Emperor Jingji shouted in a hoarse voice as he rushed forward. Old Luo, charge with me! Li Yuan's sword flashed and cut off the head of a barbarian. He charged forward side by side with Emperor Luo, trying to open a bloody path through the barbarian formation. The Phoenix Gods and the Southern Region Army move. The Zheng tribe, Night Net Palace, and Scorching Sun Temple's elders all roared and rushed toward the core of the barbarian formation. Victory was right in front of them. After fighting for so long, they could not let the evil spirit of the barbarian formation stop them from winning. Rumble! The void shook violently. At this moment, a group of black-armored cavalry emerged from the rear of the 4 barbarian army. They turned into 2 torrents and surrounded the Phoenix God clan and the Southern Region army from the flank. Li Yuan, Emperor Luo, and the injured Jingji were completely separated from the Alliance army of the North. Mo Luo army. The Sunset Battle God looked ahead. The nightmare war horses of the Mo Luo Empire were like a black tide that separated the Alliance army of the North. The one who commanded the cavalry was the current Emperor Mo Luo. Chapter 1943. Monarch Moro was riding on a majestic heavy-armored beast. His hair was disheveled and his face looked haggard. Beside him, Mo Xian led the generals of the Moro Empire to the front line. Moro, let them pass! Zhan Wu roared. The Alliance army was split into 2 by the nightmare war horses. The evil spirits were guarding the outside while the Phoenix Gods and the Southern Region army were stuck in the middle. It was extremely dangerous, and they could be swallowed by the enemy in a moment. Emperor Mo Luo rode on his battle beast steadily and stood in place. He was not shaken by the Sunset Battle God's anger. Have you forgotten the oath of the Moro family? Have you forgotten how Dendi has protected the Moro clan for hundreds of years? He is fighting against the evil god, and you have divided the battlefield and surrounded the Phoenix god race and the Southern Mountain Range army. How can you face Qin, how an old ancestor Mo Luo? How can you face Mo Qianjie in the Yellow Springs? Zhan Wu let out a thunderous roar while blocking the evil spirit's attack. Monarch Moro trembled when he heard these words. The Moro clan was established in the East Continent because of Dendi. How could he forget the ancestral teachings and family oath? But he had no choice. Ha ha. Zhan Wu, of course he knows what you said. I know it too. That's why I put the 4 barbarians' blood curse on them. Moro and all the generals, if they dare not to serve me, I dare them to rebel. The women and children of the Moro clan are trapped in the Qin imperial city. If I win, they can be reunited. If I lose, they will disappear with me. Open your eyes and look at them. The nightmare war horses belong to me now. They are Empress Ling Xian's loyal dogs. Han Lingxian, Zhan Lang, Mu Yue, and the others were fighting fiercely on the throne. Her crazy curses echoed in the sky. In order to prove her words, a few magi from the 4 barbarians took out jars and squeezed the cursed soul worms out of the jars. They squeezed hard with their fingers, and the white worms in their hands began to twist and struggle. Juice flowed out of them. At the same time, Monarch Mo Luo and all the Nightmare War Cavalry's generals turned pale. Black veins popped up on their faces, and they looked like they were in great pain. They couldn't even sit still on their battle beasts. Only one person remained unscathed, Mo Xian, Prince Mo Luo. Han Lingxian, you vicious woman. Zhan Wu scolded. They want to rebel. Of course I acted. Don't think I don't know anything in the Qin Imperial Palace. If I wasn't ruthless. Han Lingshuan's ear-piercing laughter. The fact that she didn't kill them all and placed a blood curse on every single one of the Nightmare Cavalrymen was already a huge favor, including Mo Xian. In order to show the Empress sincerity, she intentionally left Lord Moro Luo's son intact. If it weren't for the fact that there were too few sorcerers in the 4 barbarians who were proficient in ancient curses, she would have placed a curse on every single one of the Empress's personal guards. Moro, let them pass. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. Zhan Wu let out a thunderous roar. Countless lives were lost in every breath on the battlefield. It was impossible for him to be stopped here by Mo Luo just because of Qin Hao. As soon as the Twilight Battle God finished speaking, the God of War guards at the back began to move. They marched forward with rumbling steps. Although there were less than 10,000 of them left, the God of War guards were stronger than the Phoenix clan in terms of combat power. They wouldn't have been defeated if there weren't too many experts from the orthodoxies. 30,000 God of War guards withstood the simultaneous attack of 7 to 8 Overlord forces. There were still 10 God generals who survived. Killing all the Nightmare War horses of the Moro Empire was a piece of cake. Although Jing Ji, Li Yuan, and the others who were trapped inside might die because they couldn't rescue them in time. If he were to die, then so be it. Martial arts didn't care about these things. Sacrifice was necessary for victory. Father, are you ready? Mo Xian looked at the God of War guards and asked Monarch Moro, who was beside him. Emperor Mo Luo's face was full of struggle, his eyes filled with endless bitterness. Soon after, he slowly pulled out the Emperor's sword from his waist. Along with the roar of his beast, Emperor Mo Luo raised his thick forelimbs high and shouted loudly, "Nightmare War Cavalry, charge!" Boom! The entire Moro army moved. They didn't charge at the God of War guards. Instead, they orderly changed their direction. Their tall beasts formed a charging formation and charged towards the 4-winged army. Previously, the Moro army stuck close to the back of the 4-winged army. Under Han Lingshuan's watchful eyes, Moro didn't have a chance to attack. This was a cavalry that relied on their beasts to charge forward. Now, the Nightmare War horses had circled around and were separated from the 4-winged army by several thousand feet. This was enough space for their beasts to charge forward and accumulate energy. They had never forgotten the oath their family made to be Denda's servants for generations. Moro, all of you can go to hell. Han Lingxian waved her light whip fiercely. The surging will of flawless perfection forced the wave slayers to retreat. She saw the nightmare war horses charging back, and let out a shrill scream. In the four-winged army, the wizards who were holding the soul worms of Monarch Moro quickly spat out a string of characters. The curse-like ancient language activated the blood curse. They clenched their fists and cruelly crushed the soul worms. One by one, they smashed the jars as if they had gone mad. The wizards' frail bodies actually charged towards the beast. At this point, they knew the four-winged army was completely finished. Charge! With the sacred oath and the dignity and glory of the four-winged army, all the Moro generals followed their monarch and stepped on a path of no return. While the war beasts were charging forward, Monarch Mo Luo's body exploded into a bloody light. Screams of flesh being crushed could be heard from the vanguard of the Nightmare War Mount. Every cloud of bloody mist that flew in the air was a commander who was commanding the soldiers in battle. Charge! Sparkling tears danced under Mo Xian's helmet. The bodies that were running side by side with him kept disappearing. The beasts that had lost their masters let out an extremely tragic roar. After this battle, the four-winged army might cease to exist in this world. None of the battle beasts stopped. It was as if their owners were still sitting on their empty backs. The battle beasts' roars were abnormally loud. They ran faster and faster, causing the sky to tremble. It was as if they were a torrent that was faster than time. Mo Xian led the soldiers who had lost their leader and was the first to charge into the four barbarians' army. Puff! The horse spear, which was as thick as a goose egg, pierced through the bodies of 5 to 6 burly men from the four barbarians. The speed of the magical beast did not slow down at all. It carried him straight to the center of the group of sorcerers. The black spear pierced through the heads of the sorcerers one by one. Batches of beasts avoided the wounded warriors of the god race and the people of the southern region. The powerful impact broke the hearts of the four-winged army men like a black tide rolling across the battlefield. At this time, there was not a single four-winged army man in front of the Empress. Chapter 1944. Mo Xian stood alone at the end of the battlefield. In front of him was Empress Lingxuan's throne, and behind him was a blood-stained path. The path was thousands of feet long, and it was filled with piles of corpses of the Sea tribe. The hand holding the spear trembled slightly, and streams of blood flowed down his armor. Some of it was the enemy's, and some of it was Mo Xian's. Mo Xian raised his hand and took off his helmet. Black, glowing void chains floated around his body. He had destroyed the barbarian army with a single attack, annihilated the barbarian tribe, and single-handedly killed all the sorcerers who had cast the curse. He had saved Jingji, Li Yuan, and the encompassing emperor from being surrounded. Mo Xian's performance was unstoppable, but at this moment there was no pride on his face. He looked at the empty backs of the battle beasts and couldn't find the shadows of Monarch Mo Luo and his uncles, nor could he feel the aura of any of his family members. Also, when he thought of the old and young of his clan who were trapped in the Qin imperial city, Mo Xian's heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. On the throne of the Empress, the battle was getting more and more intense. Han Lingxian fought alone against several unblemished great emperors. Not only did she not lose, but the death of the Sea army ignited her hysterical madness and killing intent. The annihilation of the four-winged army completely determined the outcome of the battle. Looking around, except for a small part of the Empress's personal army that was still stubbornly resisting, there was no other army that could restrain the Northland Alliance army within a radius of 10,000 miles around Sunset Peak. But this didn't mean that Han Lingxian had lost. On the contrary, she was alive and Evil God wasn't dead. So what if she lost 100,000 personal troops? She could make up for it sooner or later. 200,000, 300,000, or even 1,000,000 renhuangs. When she cultivated the immortal path, it would be easy. The death of her subordinates didn't affect Empress Lingxian. Instead, it made her more focused. After watching for so long, it's time for us to come to an end. On the chessboard, Zhou Wudao, who had inherited the will of the 10 underworld's demon king, said coldly to Prince Ningwu. Ning Tianqing saw the destruction of Empress Lingxuan's army with his own eyes, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. When the Alliance army of the North lost, he might still have room to fight. But now there was no room for survival. Indeed, it's time to end this. Ning Tianqing retracted his gaze and looked at the Prince of Great Zhou, Zhou Wudao. He was curious and envious. Zhou Wudao's talent couldn't be said to be at the top of his generation, but this person could always encounter heaven-defying good fortune. The next time they met, he would always bring a pleasant surprise. Now, he was no longer inferior to Ning Tianqing, the child of destiny. He knew that everything Zhou Wudao had now was inseparable from a certain person, Dendi of the East Continent. If he was given another chance, would Ning Tianqing still think that he was the chosen one? Would he still start a war with the southern domain for his wild ambitions? He had asked himself this question during the battle in Feng City. At that time, he made his choice without hesitation. Still will. But now, he was wavering. Maybe it's interesting to accompany Qin Hao. Ning Tianqing's hand slowly reached into the chess bag. This time, he grabbed all the chess pieces and threw them on the chessboard. If he had kicked Ning Lingzhu off the stage back then, he would have immediately abandoned his identity as the crown prince and followed Qin Hao. Today, he would have been one of the young emperors laughing proudly at the sunset battlefield. Perhaps at that time, Zhou Wudao and Mo Xian would no longer be eye-catching, and he would have become the most eye-catching star besides Dendi and the sunset battle god. At that time, what was the difference between him and the child of destiny? After all, Dendi and the battle god's ambitions weren't in the divine wilderness. Unfortunately, there were no ifs in life. Whoosh! Chess light flashed across the sky, and the chessboard that spanned across the heavens and the earth erupted with brilliant light. Zhou Wudao roared, and demonic qi erupted. The image of a majestic throne appeared behind him, and on the throne, an imposing figure could be vaguely seen, overlooking the world like a god that ruled the continent. Then, a monstrous demonic qi swept across, and the chess light shattered. An old face filled with chess pieces appeared, twisted in pain, and picked up the chess bag with its mouth, trying to escape into the distance. Seeing this, Zhou Wudao flapped his huge demonic wings and flew forward. He stretched out his hand, which surged with demonic qi, and pressed the old face back into the chess bag. Finally, he held the bag in his hand. That old chess god's Dharma treasure might be useful to Qin Hao. Leave it with me for now. Zhou Wudao chuckled and stuffed the chess bag into his chest. After all, it belonged to the 14 primordial spirit gods. As for Ning Tianqing, Zhou Wudao ignored him. He flapped his demonic wings and flew towards the edge of the divine wilderness Dao world. Dendi needed his help. Divine wilderness continent, I really want to take another look at you. After Zhou Wudao left, Ning Tianqing slowly turned around and tried his best to look in the direction of the southern region, but his misty eyes could not see his homeland. Then, with a shattering sound, Crown Prince Ning Wu collapsed into thousands of fragments of light, melting bit by bit. Roar! Ferocious sound waves reverberated in the ears. Zhan Wu threw a punch forward, and the blinding light of particles forced a massive figure in front of him to retreat repeatedly. At that moment, the sunset battle god's eyes were filled with puzzlement. Although the 4 barbarians' army was destroyed and the curse stopped, the giant spirit did not disappear. Chapter 1945. The cracks caused by the art of unbridled combat slowly healed, and the gray mist-like body gradually glowed with a grayish-white halo. The giant spirit was vaguely strengthened, and its soul became more solid. In other words, it had undergone some kind of qualitative change. If Zhan Wu could block it easily before by ignoring his 5 senses, now he had to release at least 2 or 3 attacks to force the evil spirit back. Boom! A loud noise reverberated from somewhere on the battlefield, where many disciples of the Thunder Department and Divine Herbalist Valley from the Judgment Palace had gathered. At this time, the power of the will of the Great Path swept out, and dense rays of light intertwined with the thunder of the Great Path. Zhan Wu looked over and saw 2 familiar figures tumbling out from the explosion of lightning. Zhuge Xiu was yelling and dragging the wounded Thunder Dragon in her hand. She rushed out of the lightning blockade before the lightning waves engulfed it. The disciples of the Thunder Department and Divine Herbalist Valley were not so lucky. Many of them were annihilated by the lightning and torn into nothingness. Gradually, the light dissipated, and a strong figure stepped out from that direction. The Lord Hallmaster Lei Ju walked leisurely, and lightning surrounded his body. He did not pay attention to the disciples of the 2 orthodoxies who were affected. He stared at the escaping Zhuge Xiu and seemed to feel pity. He was so close to killing the Thunder Dragon. He forced Zhuge Xiu to retreat. "I'm afraid Lei Ju is not as simple as he looks. I'll hold the giant spirit back first." Zhan Lu came to the Sunset God of War. The evil spirit carries the will of the wizards of the 4 barbarians before they died. Its power is not to be underestimated. Can you hold it back? Zhan Wu glanced at Lu. In order to delay the arrival of Han Lingxuan's troops at the Sunset Peak, Lu had sustained many injuries. There were only 3 golden guardian crows left, and the evil aura emitted by the evil spirit had changed. Lu should be able to feel it. "I'll try my best. I'll try my best to stay alive before you come back." Zhan Lu smiled bitterly. "If you can't hold it back, let it out. North Territory Alliance Army, retreat from the battlefield." Zhan Wu said. He did not want Zhan Lu to die fighting the giant spirit. At worst, he would let it out and let it wreak havoc. Let's see who could run faster. After explaining all this, Zhan Wu suddenly rushed forward like a fierce wind. He abandoned the giant spirit and instantly arrived where Lei Ju was. His fist shot out, causing the void to tremble. Endless light particles burst out. The smile on Lei Ju's face gradually disappeared. He looked at Zhan Lu's eyes. He Zhan Lu, and the Emperor's will, to block the Sunset God of War. Zhan Wu activated the Absolute Battle Scripture, and the light of the particles of the precepts swallowed up the heavenly thunder and hit Lei Ju. Lei Ju opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body shook a few times, and his eyes became even more ferocious. He roared, and the thunder was like a reignited flame that swept out violently. It was as if he had transformed into a dazzling thunder god and fought with Zhan Wu. "Everyone, how long are you going to watch?" Outside the void battlefield, southern border Shirtian Buddha, the Arch said solemnly. "The battle is basically over. Empress Ling Xian's defeat is obvious. The North Territory Alliance Army, formed by the Phoenix Flower 9 veins, includes the orthodoxies of the 4 regions and 5 realms. This force represents the will of the divine wilderness. Can't you see it? This is the heavenly Tao." Vajra Institute's Little Saint Jemiao said. "What can we do?" 7-Star Herb Institute's Dean Feng looked at the battlefield. The battle on the throne was a battle between flawless emperors. The great commander's battle tower and the giant spirit were equally dangerous. At present, all the remaining battles were not easy to control. It was better to be safe than sorry. Since it's the will of the heavenly Tao, Jixia Academy should have a seat. Are you willing to help Commander Lu? The ancient sword behind Old Man Taya slowly floated up. Although they had not entered the flawless Emperor Tao, they were not weak compared to ancestral patriarch Du Hai and Bai Di. The Buddha Dharch explained the will of the heavenly Tao. If the 3 deans still don't understand, don't blame us for complaining to Dendu later. A Jixia Academy elder holding a jade rui threatened coldly. He looked in the direction of the giant spirit and shouted, "Kill!" Boom, 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 boom. 4 true self-emperor lights burst forward. The Jixia Academy's 4 primes attacked at the same time. In the next moment, many nomological lights surrounded the giant spirit and bombarded it. When the 4 of them attacked, the light of the sun bloomed above Shirtian Buddha Thearka's head. The space was suddenly filled with Sanskrit sounds as if thousands of Buddhas were chanting. There was also an extremely shocking sound of a Buddhist bell. Clang! With this sound, Shirtian Buddha Thearka's body suddenly expanded with Tao will. More than 1,000 arms stretched out from his back as if he had transformed into a huge ancient Buddha. He sat cross-legged in the void and looked majestic. The Buddha's palm pressed down. Endless swastikas spun in the palm and slammed toward the giant spirit's head. Zhan Lu's injuries were not light. He had braved so many unblemished cultivators to come back. If he was left alone to fight the giant spirit, he would not be able to last long. The North Territory Alliance Army included the 5 realms of the East Continent, as well as the empires, sect, and family orthodoxies of the 4 regions. Imperceptibly, they carried the will of the divine wilderness. The Vajra court was the holy land of Buddhism in the Southern Territory. Naturally, it was the orthodoxy of the divine wilderness. You all. Dean Feng saw the Buddha Arch and the 4 Te primes attacking and sighed deeply. He looked at the other 2 vice deans and made up his mind. In an instant, endless medicinal light spread out from their bodies. Tao will swept forward and poured into Zhan Lu and the Tai primes. The 3 deans of the 7-star herb court were naturally extraordinary in cultivation, but in terms of combat, they were definitely not as strong as martial artists who were good at attacking. Moreover, if they went up to fight the giant spirit, if they were not careful, they would end up like Island Lord Wu Huang. At this point, which emperor did not cherish their own lives? It was better to obediently support from the rear. At least, they would not be blamed by Denda later. "Everyone, thank you," Zhan Lu shouted. With the help of Shirtian Buddha Arch, Jixia Academy, and the herb court, the pressure on him was greatly reduced. Although these people might have been forced by the situation, they could indeed prolong the time for Zhan Lu to stop the giant spirit. Boom! The Buddha palm pressed down, and the Buddhist power contained abundant divine power. Shirtian Buddha Thearka's Tao will seem to be very harmful to the evil spirit. This palm actually cracked the giant spirit's head. Endless swastikas flowed into the wound, and the evil spirit immediately let out a deafening roar. In the distance, Lei Ju sensed something, and the sharpness in his eyes became sharper. Facing Zhan Wu, an expert who was almost impossible to defeat, the Lord Hallmaster finally erupted his true strength. The surrounding great Tao lightning dissipated, and evil qi began to overflow from Lei Ju's pores. Shrieking ghost smoke danced above his head. He swept out his arm, and the grayish-white evil qi swept forward and hit the giant spirit's soul body. The cracks caused by Shirtian Buddha Arch quickly healed. At this time, countless ugly human heads appeared on Lei Ju's back. "It's really you. Who are you?" Zhan Wu stopped for a moment and looked coldly at Lei Ju. The shamans of the 4 barbarians used the ancient life-burning curse to condense their will and infuse it into the evil spirit. However, the one who really controlled the evil spirit was not the 4 barbarians but Lei Ju. "Who am I?" Lei Ju pointed to his nose and replied with a smile, "It has always been me. Just like you, I am the Lord Hallmaster of the Judgment Hall. Unfortunately, the God of War will never have the chance to know my true identity." Chapter 1946. The endless evil light flew forward, and the deformed heads expressed all kinds of emotions. They cried, screamed, and laughed crazily. They were hidden in the evil light and turned into a torrent that rolled toward the sunset war god, wanting to devour him. The space was filled with wails and howls. The Thunder Art's abnormality was very similar to the evil god. Although it was not as terrifying as the evil god that Qin Hao fought, it was like a different person compared to before. At least he would no longer be suppressed by Zhan Wu. The evil aura that permeated from the Thunder Art's body had gradually raised his cultivation to the flawless Emperor realm. He was qualified to compete with Zhan Wu directly. At this time, as the Thunder Art forced out the hidden evil power, the most direct manifestation was that it affected the giant spirit. The strength of the giant spirit increased along with the Thunder Art, and its aura was even more shocking. The giant fist smashed out, and the evil light shook Zhan Lu and the four Tai people to the point that they could not stand steadily. The Emperor light that protected them melted. If not for a layer of Buddha light that fell from the sky at the critical moment, this blow would have taken the lives of the four Tai people. Zhan Lu's strength was reduced due to the injury, and South Border Buddhist Emperor Shutian became the main force to stop the giant spirit. Thousands of golden courtyard monks sat around the Buddhist emperor's huge Buddha body, forming a magnificent scene of thousands of Buddhas chanting scriptures. The monks all chanted the Mahavairakana scriptures, and the holy light on their bodies was dazzling. Their wills resonated with the Buddhist emperor, and the Buddha light on everyone's body began to flow toward the ancient Buddha body. But even so, Buddhist Emperor Shutian still could not trap the giant spirit. With a deafening roar, the four golden Buddha walls built by the scriptures suddenly collapsed. The Buddhist emperor's body trembled, and dark red blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. Half of his kasaya had already been torn. At this time, the giant spirit broke out with a roar. The people of the war tower retreated one after another as they were powerless to stop it. The giant spirit waved its fist with the gray light and smashed into a nearby group of people who were fighting. Over there, Shao Yi, Emperor Qi, and Yi Longyuan suddenly realized that there was a huge shadow over their heads. When they looked up, they could not help but turn pale with fright. Leave there quickly." Shao Han's heart beat violently, and he shouted anxiously. "Uncle Shao." Face like cream also anxiously called out. Her voice was so nervous that it sounded like she was about to cry. She had personally witnessed the tragic end of Endless Glory's bloodline. But at this time, how could Shao Yi and the others escape? When the giant spirit's shadow shrouded them, the monstrous evil might that pervaded the air had already scared them stiff on the spot. It was as if they were suppressed in place, and could only wait to be destroyed. Roar! A shout came from Lei Ju's mouth and spread into the void. Whether it was intentional or not, Lei Ju's shout was not abnormal when he was fighting with the sunset battle god. It did not cause any discomfort. However, the giant spirit seemed to have received some kind of instruction. The fist that was smashing towards Shao Yi and the others paused slightly and slowed down a little. Taking advantage of this miracle, Shao Yi and the others suddenly reacted. Waves of Emperor Light shone again, and Qi Ziqing, Yi Longyuan, and Duan Zhanfei desperately escaped from the giant spirit's shadow. Even so, several Yuan emperors of the northern frontier with weaker cultivation were still swept away by the evil wind carried by the giant spirit's fist. Before they could say their last words, they directly dissipated between heaven and earth, just like the lord of Wuhuang Island. Among them were the palace masters of the Juyin Palace of the northern frontier. That was close. Shao Han's heart in his throat relaxed. The scene just now was extremely dangerous. Boom! A strong fluctuation shook from the throne. Shao Han turned his head and saw Empress Lingxuan's long whip piercing forward like a sharp thorn, piercing through Zhan Lang's chest. Under the whip of the Empress, the power of the way of the flawless consummation erupted and the wind was blown away. Han Lingxian! Mu Yue shouted angrily. The imperial sword in her hand surged with the brilliant light of judgment. Dilly poured all of his power into this attack. It was as if he had merged into the sword as well. A shocking sword chi erupted and pierced forward. "Good, I've wanted to kill you for a long time." Han Lingxuan's resentment that had been suppressed for hundreds of years erupted as she let out a shrill roar. She had clearly been on Sunset Peak before, so why did Mu Yue still come to discuss the Tao with the Alchemy Emperor every few days even though she knew this? How shameless! Han Lingxian had hated Mu Yue for a long time. She did not say it before, but now this hatred turned into an uncontrollable killing intent. She wanted to tear Mu Yue apart on the spot. Buzz. New Moon's imperial spirit erupted, and a furnace of the Great Path enveloped her. She activated the alchemy spell in her hand, and the furnace began to absorb the spiritual qi of the heavens. As she slapped out, the furnace blasted forward. At the same time, Mo Xian, who had just annihilated the barbarian tribe, galloped toward the throne. He pointed his spear at the Empress. From far away, a void chain flew out from behind him. The black chains merged with the space and covered everything like an unstoppable flood. Soon, they wrapped around Han Lingxuan's body in advance, binding her tightly. The more they tightened, the stronger they became. Qingji, help me! At the critical moment of life and death, Han Lingxian let out a thunderous roar. As her voice fell, a huge pitch-black demonic eye appeared above the throne. The moment the demonic eye opened, it emitted boundless demonic power. It was like the supreme eye of a demon god opening its eyes. An indescribable powerful spirit swept out and rushed into the minds of New Moon and Mo Xian. Buzz. The furnace that was blasting forward suddenly stopped, and the void chains that were binding the Empress broke. Han Lingxian laughed heartily. She wanted to swing her whip to kill Mu Yue, but she was shocked to find that the other end of the whip was firmly held back by the heavily injured Yu Feng and Zhan Lang. Han Lingxian did not hesitate to use her palm. Her palm, which contained the power of flawless perfection, was suffused with monstrous imperial light as it slapped toward Mu Yue. Pucci! Blood splattered. The light of judgment on the sword broke the Empress' palm light, pierced through Han Lingxuan's flesh, and finally pierced into her left eye. At the same time, with a heavy sound of impact, her palm landed squarely on Mu Yue's chest, sending her flying like a fallen leaf. Mu Yue was sent flying, and the Emperor's sword in her hand was also broken by the palm. Ah! My eye! An unbearable scream reverberated from Empress Ling Xian's mouth. She had Mu Yue's broken sword in one hand. She hurriedly released the other hand that was holding the whip and touched the wound on her face. However, at this moment she could only see one side of the world. She could no longer see the other side. The other side was endless red. Mother! Qingji Han revealed herself and landed beside Han Lingxian. She supported the tottering Empress Ling Xian. Looking at the bloody hole on her face, she took a deep breath. Get lost, I'm not your mother. Han Lingxian struggled to push Qingji Han away. She screamed in pain, but gradually laughed. She covered her face and laughed crazily. So ruthless. Xiao Han was frightened. At the same time, he could still feel Sister Weiwei's aura. Saint Emperor Jiang had already moved to save her. This woman is not weak. Everyone is exhausted. It won't be easy to defeat her. Muri commented. Even so, even if Zhan Lang and the others did not exhaust themselves, it would be difficult for them to hurt Han Lingxian. Including Muri herself. Even if she still had her physical body, it would be difficult for her to completely suppress Han Lingxian in her peak state. Unfortunately, I can't help. Xiao Han blamed herself. She could not help in this battle at the unblemished level. The path of the true self did not require her to do anything. Although Han Lingxian was injured, her sword was not enough to take the Empress' life. The only one left, Xin Yue, who could still fight, obviously could not defeat the Empress. Junior sister, are you willing to lend me your physical body? Muri looked at Xiao Han. Xiao Han was slightly stunned. After understanding, she smiled and said, Of course. Chapter 1947. Muri's imperial body had been shattered by Zhan Wu. She relied on her spiritual soul to perform the law, but its power was ultimately limited. Moreover, when she fought, it would cause great damage to her own soul. If Xiao Han let go of the control, the spiritual soul would retreat to the side and be temporarily replaced by Muri, which would help her senior sister to exert more power. Xiao Han was also from the Divine Palace, and he had been taught by Eastern Sky on Migres Peak. The two's cultivation methods were of the same origin, and they could perfectly combine their souls. Muri's use of the Divine Palace's imperial method would not cause any hindrance. As for the final effect, it was unknown. Giving up the physical body, the soul retreated to the side, and being controlled by an unblemished cultivator at will. Ordinary people would need enough courage, but for Xiao Han and Muri, this was not a concern at all. Roar. The thunder technique forced out the hidden evil force and restrained the sunset war god. The giant spirit condensed by the will of the wizards of the four barbarians before they died was like a tiger that had escaped from its cage. War Tower and Tai could not stop it. Seeing this, Tao Zhu could only drag his exhausted body and join in. The slightly recovered Yang spirit, Empress Shui Yao, many island masters of the 9 branches of the Phoenix Flower sect, and the old island master, gathered together and formed an imperial battle matrix. Countless imperial precepts blasted forward. With Shirtian Buddha Emperor's Buddhist supreme technique as the main force, Tao Zhu used the Yin and Yang Dao technique to condense the power of the emperors together to resist the giant spirit. Everyone, this is the last fight. You must hold on. Tao Zhu's face turned red as he shouted. At this time, a huge bright Yin and Yang Dao diagram bloomed under everyone's feet. With Bo Changji as the link, everyone could clearly feel each other's thoughts. Standing on the Yin and Yang Dao diagram, their imperial will merged, and the emperors erupted with the supreme power of the Great Path. Shackles of Buddhist mantras fell from the void, trapping the giant spirit like a four-sided curtain. Sacred light flowed all over the sky, and the chanting of countless monks came from the space. At the same time, 2 Yin and Yang Dao diagrams also appeared under the gigantic spirit's feet and head. Destructive Dao laws blasted from the top and bottom of the gigantic spirit from 2 directions. Evil-slaying swords, thunderbolts, storms, these laws, following the will of the emperors, continuously bombarded the gigantic spirit's body. The gigantic spirit howled incessantly and frantically slammed into the Buddhist mantra shackles on all sides. Dong. Heavy footsteps came from the void. Looking into the distance, they saw Kuang Tang holding Xian Long's bloody head in one hand and a ball of light in the other. He was running towards the emperors like a madman. Inside the light ball in his hand, Xian Long's remnant soul was like a giant spirit that was trying to break free from the shackles of the Buddha's mantra. Extracting the soul, skinning the skin, and tearing the corpse into 1,000 pieces. Tang has done everything. Kuang Tang spat out crazed words. His body was covered in wounds, and his clothes were stained with blood. The Xian Long holy man was not a weakling. He also had a glimpse of the unblemished Tao. If not for his fear of death, he might not have died in the hands of Kuang Tang. At this moment, the first thing Kuang Tang did when he ran back was to bite the tip of his tongue and spit a mouthful of blood on Xian Long's head. He threw it towards the gigantic spirit. The moment the head left his hand, a terrifying shadow of the phoenix divine bird was born. It spread its wings that covered the sky and carried the flames of the phoenix god into the cage. Instantly, the gigantic spirit's howl became even more intense. The evil aura in the surroundings became thinner as the flames of the phoenix burned. At the border of the divine wilderness, under the seal of the Yuan Ling gods, several figures were struggling. As they breathed, a suffocating feeling filled the air. It was not any weaker than the Sunset Peak battlefield below. Qin Hao's condition was very bad. His body had returned to normal, and the scales on his body flickered as if they would disappear at any time. The Phoenix Grandmaster was even worse. His face was frighteningly pale, and the phoenix blade in his hands was almost unsteady. His body trembled violently. The phoenix god's cry was a divine item. It relied on the laws of the divine way to unleash its power. However, the Phoenix Grandmaster forced himself to use the divine item, and the price he had to pay was to burn his blood essence. He had to continuously pour the blood of the Phoenix clan onto the ancestral god's weapon. Only in this way could the divine item be consecrated. However, as time passed, this undoubtedly became a huge burden on the Phoenix Grandmaster. He no longer had the energy to wield the god's cry blade. The evil soul was not much better. Hundreds of the evil spirits that surrounded him had been slashed. The damage caused by the indestructible laws and the god's cry blade could not be healed by his evil powers. However, compared to Qin Hao, whose draconic powers were about to dissipate, and the Phoenix Grandmaster who had lost so much blood that he could barely stand, the evil soul was clearly in a much better state. At this time, Zhou Wudao was coldly staring at the evil soul. The huge demonic wings on his back flapped, and his pitch-black eyes were especially serious. After inheriting the power of the 10 Nether Demon God, his vision was naturally different from before. From the will of the 10 Nether Demon God, he knew many things that mortal martial artists did not know. He could completely conclude that this evil soul that gathered all evil had the qualifications to achieve the divine way. Gathering all the laws into one and encompassing the power of the common people, all he lacked was a strong enough physical body. If he was given this opportunity, no one in the divine wilderness would be able to stop him. After fighting for so long, I can only use that move. Zhou Wudao heaved a heavy sigh and looked at Qin Hao. If he wanted to kill the evil soul, he had to break through the shackles and become a true god. However, Qin Hao was still unable to comprehend the power of faith and increase the strength of his laws. If this continued, even if Zhan Wu came, it would be useless. This was because none of them could immediately ascend to godhood. There was only one way left to kill the evil soul. That move. Qin Hao's face was dripping with sweat as he took a few deep breaths. Zhou Wudao meant 9 Heavens God's punishment array. Zhou Wudao's eyes were serious. In his body, an obscure aura began to spread, and everywhere it passed, the space turned into darkness. In addition to the will of the 10 Nether Demon God, he also had the substance of no return. Will it work? Qin Hao said as he stretched out his palms. His left hand was burning with blood flames, and his right hand was sparkling with water. His body was red on both sides and emitted a blue light, which made him look very strange. Do you have a better idea? Zhou Wudao said with difficulty. Naturally, he could understand Qin Hao's concerns. If the 9 elements were still in the original state, the success rate of killing the evil soul would be very high. But now, the 9 elements had all been refined into soul power. Except for Qin Hao, the cultivation of the others was very low, and the strength of the elements was undoubtedly reduced. I think we can give it a try. Qin Hao didn't have a better idea. He silently gave the Phoenix Grand Elder a look. The Phoenix Grand Elder nodded, and a loud phoenix cry rang out. He turned into a beam of light and swooped down, leaving the battlefield. This place was no longer suitable for him to stay. Why, have you given up struggling? The evil soul, in the appearance of eastern sky, smiled and said, Fight to the death? He didn't want to die. He carried the persistence and resentment of the thousands of disciples and peak masters of the divine palace. He gathered all the laws into one. In the world, except for the divine level, there was no power that could directly kill him. He could continuously absorb the evil in the world to supplement his own path. As long as the world was alive, he would never disappear. Once, you gathered the supreme masters of the 5 realms and went to the Valley of the Buried God to give me a big gift. Now I will return this gift to you. Evil soul, are you ready to accept it? Qin Hao said in a low voice. As soon as he finished speaking, his palms suddenly overlapped. The red lotus and the Jingyu, water and fire, merged. Buzz! A fierce will of the way erupted in the void, and this will swept toward the evil soul. In the process, Zhou Wudao pushed out with his palm, and a black torrent blasted out. It was like an abyss that swallowed the world, and it merged into the will of the way. Set up the matrix, 9 heavens slay the gods. Qin Hao let out a thunderous roar. His voice rolled downwards, causing the Sunset Peak battlefield to shake violently. At this time, in the southern region army that was annihilating the 4 barbarian tribes, Li Wanji's mind shook as if he had been summoned. He looked toward the sky. Beside him, Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Void chain, go. Mo Xian shook his head hard. Just now, Qingji Han's spiritual attack had interrupted the rules of the will of the way. At this moment, under Denda's order, he pointed his finger to the top of his head. The chains around his body all disappeared into the void and gathered crazily toward the sky. Their shape couldn't be seen, and only a whoosh 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 sound could be heard. All-encompassing gold, go! Shouwuk formed a sword technique and hurriedly forced Tiendo to retreat. He urged his sword toward the sky in time. It was a dazzling golden light, and it spun and flew into the sky. Li Wanji's body was filled with a majestic yellow halo. Lin Feng's body was swept by a fierce wind. The power of the 2 elements, Qiankuan earth and wind of misfortune, moved side by side. They followed closely behind the all-encompassing gold and flew to the same place. He needs me. I can't fall yet. In front of Holy Emperor Jiang, Mu Yue, who had fallen into a coma and was sitting cross-legged, suddenly opened her eyes. She looked up at the sky, and her weak body suddenly erupted with Tao power. A beautiful stream of light began to surge into the sky. Her hair curled up as she shouted. Red lotus fire, nether cleansing water, stalk of no return, void chain, all-encompassing gold, Qiankuan earth, wind of misfortune, light of judgment. These were the purest primordial powers left in the mortal world. They kept gathering. Looking from afar on the battlefield, countless lights came from different directions and finally converged at one point. The scene was spectacular. Following this, the expression of the evil spirit in the eastern sky changed. He said in a low voice, "Not good." The 9 elements of desolation formed the 9 heavens gods' punishment formation. Qin Hao wanted to borrow the power of the formation to destroy the evil spirit. There was no chance to dodge. As Denda's voice resounded through the world, the space where the evil spirit was sealed by the Nirvana Tao will. Then, chains that were hidden in the void and invisible to the naked eye wrapped around the evil spirit's body. Many of the chains directly pierced through the evil spirit. They passed through the deformed heads and wrapped around the evil spirit. Boom! A great fire ignited in front of him. The radiance of the red lotus, which was enough to burn sin, swallowed the evil spirit's vision. However, everything he saw was reduced to darkness, as if he had stepped into a realm of no return. Fierce winds howled as the wind of misfortune slashed at the evil spirit. The Qiankuan earth and nether cleansing waters' powerful regenerative powers made the fire burn even more fiercely, the chains tighter, and the darkness even blacker. Especially when a streak of golden sword light pierced into the evil spirit's head with incomparable accuracy, the evil spirit with the face of eastern sky let out an extremely tragic cry. Chapter 1948. The primordial elements were nurtured by the heavenly Tao. Because of their uniqueness, they were extremely special and could not be found in the mortal world. Therefore, they were deeply feared by martial arts. Even though the evil soul had gathered all techniques and evil power, it was still unable to assimilate the primordial elements. These 9 elements were unique in the world. Because of this, when it was trapped, the 9 elements intertwined and complemented each other. The lethality of the 9 elements was something that the evil soul had never experienced before. The damage it suffered was extremely severe. It was the strongest product under the divine Tao, unless martial arts proved themselves as gods and suppressed it with the laws. Otherwise, even the evil soul could not withstand it. Qin Hao waved his finger, and a glaring light beam shot out from his golden finger. It kept drawing forward and drew a 9-pointed star array in the void. The evil soul was trapped in the center. The 9 stars were dazzling. As the 8 elements fell into the eye of the array, the power of the elements exploded even more fiercely. The red lotus fire burned everything and could even melt sins. The wind of doom whistled and increased the intensity of the fire. The chains that were invisible to the naked eye sealed the entire array and turned into a cage. The soul could not escape. The evil soul was suddenly eroded by a Tao will that it had never experienced before. Its evil power could not assimilate the 9 elements. Especially under the support of the array, the red lotus fire exceeded its tolerance limit. It roared and roared in the raging hellfire. The space vibrated and produced countless cries, like the screams of countless souls. The intense golden light stabbed into the evil soul's head. The light blade slashed across and tore it apart from the center. The light of judgment was placed in the eye of the array. Rays of light scattered in the sky. This divine impact cut off countless evil spirits and the evil soul's body. 1 turned into 2, 2 into 3, 3 into thousands. The more it was cut, the more scattered it became. In the raging hellfire, there was no longer an evil soul. Instead, there were thousands of obsessions and souls screaming miserably. However, although the screams were intense, these evil auras did not show any signs of being purified or burned. There's still 1 element missing. Zhou Wudao roared anxiously. Bao. Qin Hao sealed the Tao world's void with his Nirvana Tao intent and tried his best to stabilize the 9-pointed star array. He lowered his head and shouted. When Zhan Wu heard Qin Hao's shout, he naturally understood Denda's urgency. He knew that the battle with the evil soul had reached its most critical moment. He also shouted at Qin Bao, "The thunder power in your body is the royal divine thunder that Uncle Zhan gave you years ago. Your father needs it. Shoot the thunder power into the sky and gather it into the 8 shining stars. Quick!" Zhan Wu wasn't just shouting. The situation had reached the point of life and death. Zhan Wu was practically roaring in a commanding tone. "But I want to help Mother," Bao replied at the top of her voice. Her black hair danced in the wind, and a layer of spiritual radiance flickered on her body. She guarded her mind tightly. Her intent was focused on the floating demonic eye on the throne. Muri was using Xiao Han's Tharch body to fight against Han Lingxian. Qingji Han had obtained the Demon King's inheritance, so her spiritual attack couldn't be ignored. A slight mistake in a battle between experts could lead to a huge loss. Qin Bao was sharing the pressure for Muri and interfering with the demonic Ai Dao intent of Great Emperor Lingshuan's adopted daughter. "Help Dende quickly." In the sky, the huge phoenix divine bird swooped down and swept toward the throne. The phoenix patriarch's voice shook the universe. He slashed a glaring phoenix blade toward the East Continent's first princess. Qingji Han felt a strong sense of impending death from afar. The Demon King's intent in her body roared. Dilly converged toward the demonic eye of Nirvana. The floating eyeball tilted upward and blasted a beam of Nirvana light that was mixed with a spiritual attack toward the Phoenix Patriarch. Thunder. Bauer took advantage of this opportunity and pushed a thunderbolt towards the sky with her palms overlapping. The Imperial Heaven Thunder, which was covered in lightning and glowing with purple radiance, rumbled upwards. It was like a majestic thunder pillar that shot straight towards the sky. Along the way, the Qin Emperor, Qing Tiando, and Emperor Ling Xian tried their best to stop it. However, Shouwuk and Miao Li were blocking it steadily. They were unable to destroy this flying Imperial Heaven Thunder. Rumble! Heaven and earth trembled. Finally, this thunderbolt gathered with the 8 stars according to the instructions of the sunset war god and fell into the last empty array eye of the god-slaying array. In an instant the sky erupted with a divine light. The 9 stars aligned and began to wildly revolve around the tens of thousands of evil spirits in the array. Suddenly, the sky was filled with the power of thunder and the light of judgment. The cries of the evil spirits were so shrill that they didn't seem human. As the last of the primordial elements converged into the array, the power of the array was pushed to its peak. The raging turbulence made Zhou Wudao unable to stand still. He flapped his demonic wings and was swept away thousands of feet. Even though Qin Hao had stepped into the Nirvana Emperor Dao, he was also forced back by the array's power. It was too terrifying. But a clear cracking sound spread. The seal of the gods that shrouded the divine wilderness heavenly Tao cracked from a certain position. As the god-slaying array's terrifying ripples spread, the crack continued to extend until it revealed a pitch-black hole. Through the hole, it seemed that another world could be seen. Plain passage. Qin Hao's 10,000 spirit fire pupils burned brightly. He looked very carefully and firmly remembered this position from the chaotic sky. Passage, the passage left behind by the 14 origin spirit gods, can go to other planes. I can't die, this god absolutely can't die. Many evil spirits were scattered, but the evil spirits were still struggling. Great void. Qin Hao shouted towards the void. His body was suffused with a mysterious halo, giving people a sense of supreme grandeur. Immediately, a beam of light flew over from afar, dragging out an extremely long emerald shadow. Dende caught it in his palm. Almost at the same time, Zhan Wu abandoned the honest battle scripture, and focused on all 6 senses. His monstrous particle fist shook the flying thunder art. A noble divine bow made of pure gold rose up and flew towards Dende. Archer Emperor Armor. Qin Hao shouted himself hoarse, almost using up all his trump cards. Xiantian Peak put on the 12 Zodiac Palace's battle armor and spread out the 12 wings on his back. The color of the armor gradually returned to its original appearance. The silver scales emitted a bright golden luster, like a layer of liquid slowly spreading until it completely covered Dende's body. Qin Hao held the sunset divine bow and placed the great void sword on it. The sunset mantra circulated around his body, and the indestructible precepts flowed towards the divine sword. Looking from afar, the light that erupted from there covered the entire East continent. The people of the 5 realms were shocked. This arrow is for the divine palace. This arrow is for the warriors who sacrificed themselves in this battle today. This arrow is for the 600 years of suffering of my 2 lives. This arrow is for returning a pure land to the divine wilderness. For longevity or for the common people. Migres Peak Venerable's words were still ringing in his ears. Now Qin Hao could answer the old Migres Peak Venerable. For longevity and for the common people. Boom. The string of the sunset divine bow vibrated, and the great void sword shot out, carrying the light of the 9 realms of martial arts toward the core of the god-slaying formation. With this arrow, the entire battlefield of the sunset peak turned into the color of ink. All the emperors lost their brilliance, and only the sunset peak shone brightly. No, my divine body, my heavenly Tao, my... The roar was drowned out by the turbulent sound waves. The arrow light entered the formation, and the divine formation collapsed. The precepts caused the beginning of the wilderness to be reversed, and everything returned to nothingness. This arrow also ended the sins of thousands of evil spirits. The space gradually stilled, including the many emperors fighting on the sunset battlefield. They all stopped and looked at the top of the sky, at the figure holding the golden divine bow. These supremes of the 5 realms had never felt that Dende was so great. In the past, they only felt fear from Qin Hao. It turned out that fear was also a kind of great kindness. Is it over? Zhou Wudao breathed a sigh of relief. Gathering the 9 elements of the wilderness, setting up the 9 heavens god-slaying formation, and holding 2 divine artifacts, Qin Hao shot this arrow with precepts. If the evil spirit did not die, then he, the prince of the great Zhou dynasty, would die. Boom! A terrifying evil light burst out. Strands of gray evil power penetrated through the fading light of the magic formation and coiled around Qin Hao's body at lightning speed. The sharp evil light even penetrated his demigod body and pierced into his flesh. The 9 heavens god-slaying formation is indeed worthy of its reputation of slaying gods. Unfortunately, other than the fire and the golden light, the other daos are too weak. If your precepts were a little stronger, you might be able to make up for the weakness of the formation. Unfortunately, even your precepts are not complete, and cannot destroy my evil source, ha ha. The hoarse metallic voice reverberated at the edge of the divine wilderness. It was the voice of thousands of men and women, and it spread like a nightmare through the entire Sunset Peak battlefield, causing the hearts of all the emperors to freeze. Zhou Wudao suddenly looked forward and saw that the evil spirit that had been detonated by the god-slaying formation no longer looked human. Its soul had been torn into dozens of pieces, and the 2 halves of Eastern Sky's head were twisted to one side like 2 crooked willow branches. His limbs were incomplete, and there was no longer any deformed ghost face on his back. Even though it was in such a miserable state, the evil soul's main body was not destroyed. Furthermore, it used the evil energy from the evil origin force to swiftly and violently counterattack Qin Hao. It tightly bound the Pill Emperor, pierced into his flesh, and dragged him towards the eastern sky. Qin Hao! Zhou Wudao shouted in horror. Don't come over. Qin Hao clenched his fists and endured the evil qi entering his body. The emperor armor made by Xiantian Peak and his demigod body were penetrated. Zhou Wudao was at the pinnacle of truth, and although he was comparable to an ordinary unblemished one, he could not withstand the evil spirit's attack. I only want this body. My request is so simple, why won't you give it to me? Fine, if you don't give it to me, I'll take it. If the heavens don't give it to me, I'll take it from them. Now, not only do I want your body, I want to devour your soul as well. The evil spirit transformed into Eastern Sky. His torn body spoke at the same time with both mouths. His eye sockets were completely white, and his evil thoughts overflowed to the heavens. 10,000 years of accumulation, time and time again, he had devoured the souls of countless geniuses on the continent and fused with their Tao. The evil body that he had painstakingly nurtured was refined by someone else, and his path to godhood was cut off. Since that was the case, he could not defeat Dendi, so he would assimilate Dendi as well. He wanted to see what Zhan Wu could do when he became Qin Hao. Evil creature. The sunset battle god raised his head and looked. His eyes were about to crack. Strands of evil power pierced Qin Hao's body like a chain and dragged toward the fragmented evil spirit. Both of them had the same kind of evil intent, so fusion was not just empty talk. Lei Ju had a relaxed smile on his face. Strands of evil light blasted toward Zhan Wu. No matter how anxious the sunset battle god was, he could not save Dendi. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. Qin Hao, listen to me. No one can save you now. You can only rely on yourself. The path of faith is not as profound as you think. Perhaps it is difficult for others to increase their laws, but for you, who was once a god, you are already a perfect god. Therefore, there is no such thing as a rank of laws. Once you comprehend faith, you can ignore the strength of the laws and return to godhood. Zhou Wudao shouted with all his might. He had the will of 10 seas, so he naturally understood the path of faith. However, because he was bound by some kind of restriction, he could not explain it completely. Then what should I do? Zhou Wudao's explanation was very simple, but Qin Hao was like a headless fly. If he had retained the memories of the first generation, Why would he be stuck at this step for so long, unable to become a god even after 3 lifetimes? Just do it. I will fight you to the death. Ah! Zhou Wudao spread out his devil wings and frantically flapped them. He pounced forward as if his life depended on it. While flying, the phantom of 10 Seas Demon King appeared above his body. He held the demon world sword in his hand and slashed at the evil spirit's broken body. Whoosh! A huge shadow flew past, and a limb that belonged to the evil spirit was slashed apart by the pitch-black devil sword. The evil light was like a whip that heavily whipped Zhou Wudao's back. His devil wings were annihilated, and the devil aura around his body dissipated. He fell straight down the sunset peak. However, he did not die. At the crucial moment, a chest pouch spread out and wrapped around his body. It blocked the evil spirit's fatal attack and protected Zhou Wudao's emperor body. Otherwise, one attack would have been enough to scatter people. However, the crack on the divine pouch left behind by Yuanling chess god became even bigger. When Zhou Wudao fell, he seemed to hear the weeping of an old man, as if he had suffered a great grievance and humiliation. Chapter 1949. Zhou Wudao knew that he couldn't do it, but he did it with the belief that he would die. This sword, Zhou Wudao didn't want to destroy the god. He knew that he couldn't do it. He just wanted to cut something from the evil soul. His wish was so simple and so small. And he did it. The prince of the great Zhou dynasty explained to Denda the belief of martial arts with the will to die. I seem to understand now. Qin Hao looked at Zhou Wudao falling to the bottom of Sunset Peak. The blood flame burning in his eyes was extinguished, and he slowly closed his eyes. Belief was a kind of affirmation. It was a kind of self-awareness, the will of the way, and the steadfastness of one's aspirations. It was like the heart of a martial artist when he cultivated. Only when the heart was not extinguished and the will never wavered could one achieve the great path. Perhaps belief had more than that. It could be some kind of sustenance, the sustenance of a person's beautiful wishes. No matter how stormy the road ahead was, no matter how difficult it was, no matter how many thorns there were, one would never give up. It could even be said that belief could also be the sustenance between people. After Zhou Wudao's sword, he believed that Qin Hao would understand the true meaning. This was a kind of belief. However, no matter what method was used to obtain the path of belief, the first thing a martial artist had to do was to affirm himself. Qin Hao did feel the strong desire that burst from the bottom of Zhou Wudao's heart when he fell. Zhou Wudao wanted him to become a god so that he could end this disaster. Migres, Tai Wei, Yun Yi, Daozong, Yao Guang, Xiantian, Kai Yang, the 7 Peak Masters, and even the predecessors of the Divine Palace, they were all Nirvana realms. These masters were all 1 in a million martial arts talent. However, in their later years of cultivation, they struggled to find the way to become a god, but they never considered starting from themselves. Stepping into nirvana, they denied themselves and the power of their will of the way. Therefore, in the end, no one could become a god. But in fact, they all had the capital to become a god. His mind was clear as a mirror. The 9 realms light stream that surrounded Qin Hao's body completely disappeared. At this moment, his psyche power spread wildly towards the boundless heaven and earth. Wherever his psyche passed, everything turned into ink. Very quickly, his psyche crossed the ocean and arrived at western Liang, the northern borderline, and the southern region. In the barren Xiliang land, the wind was howling. In the cold northern border, the cold air was sweeping. The warmth of the southern region and the abundant spiritual qi of the east continent had never been so clear in Qin Hao's mind. It was as if he had turned into the wind, the snow, and the grass and trees of the southern region. He had thrown himself into the rich spiritual qi of the east continent and coexisted with everything. To have faith, one had to first affirm oneself and be loyal to one's Tao. Then, one would talk about showing kindness to others and showing compassion to all living things. At this moment, Dendi was getting closer and closer to the evil soul. Rays of evil light pierced through his flesh and dragged his body. It was as if Qin Hao was about to be devoured by the evil soul. Below, the Tao ancestors and the people of the battle tower were struggling to resist the giant spirit. Bai Di, Mo Hai Yun Ro, and the generals of the Qin imperial city were fighting a bloody battle. All the orthodoxies who participated in the War of the Divine Wilderness were fighting to the end. If they lost this war, the 4 regions and 5 realms would become the dust of history. If the divine Tao originates from all living things, I am willing to use this broken body to become a brick under Dendi's feet. My wish is entrusted to you. Buddha said that when the gate of hell opens in the human world, the first to be devoured must be the Buddha. Pill Emperor, I'm begging you. Quickly end this disaster. The emperors who were blocking the giant spirit cried out with longing. Their eyes were filled with hope as they looked at the sky. Mo Hai cried until his face was covered in snot. Gone, everything was gone. His family's 1,000-year heritage and the Shua clan of the East Sea were all gone. However, even if they died, they should at least take the evil soul with them. Countless voices echoed on Sunset Peak. They seemed to be crying to the heavenly Tao, but they also seemed to be hoping for a miracle to happen on Qin Hao and destroy the evil soul. Waves of beliefs flew out from the bodies of countless cultivators, like countless streams of light flying into the sky. All of them gathered on the body of the alchemy Dharch who had his eyes closed. Perhaps none of the sovereigns knew that at this moment, their beliefs had gathered into a mystical force of the great Tao. It merged with Qin Hao's will of the great Tao and was refined by him. Everything became clearer under the perception of his will. Although Qin Hao had his eyes closed, he could feel everyone's inner emotions, including the warriors who had fallen to the bottom of Sunset Peak. Qin Hao could empathize with that pain. Countless wills merged and gathered, like the flowers in the mountains and the small fish in the river, jumping and waving at him. Under the stimulation of this force, gradually, the scenes of the past buried deep in Qin Hao's consciousness appeared frequently. The fragmented memories of the past made his expression change. Anger, struggle, pain, regret, until he returned to normal. Buzz. The edge of the divine wilderness Tao world trembled. At this moment, Dendi opened his eyes. He felt that his psyche power seemed to cover everything in the divine wilderness. It might be a little exaggerated, but every person, every living being, down to every grain of sand, all wills were resonating with him. At this moment, he seemed to be one with all life, becoming the Tao of all life. So, this is the heavenly Tao, Qin Hao said indifferently. His golden eyes flickered, and the evil light that had pierced into his flesh broke and melted away. At this moment, he stared at the ugly monster in front of him. Although the evil soul was born from the convergence of all evil thoughts, gathered all Dharma into one, and refined the Tao of all life, it was still a part of the heavenly Tao. Buzz! A force swept out. Qin Hao stood in the sky. His emperor armor fell off, revealing the damaged flesh on his body. These wounds quickly healed on their own. Faintly, through the faint radiance emitted from his body, one could see an extremely divine will slowly rotating in his body. You! The evil soul watched as the power of all evil melted on Dendi's body. An extremely strong sense of oppression swept out in front of it. The evil soul, which did not know what life and death was, let out a terrified cry. In front of me, you have to respectfully call me God. Qin Hao raised his palm and slowly pressed it forward. There was no flickering radiance. This palm was ordinary and mediocre, but as he stretched out his palm, the void elements went berserk. A formless heavenly Tao power roared towards the sky above the evil soul. A layer of intense ripples appeared on the seal of gods. Through the radiance of the seal, one could faintly see the 14 supreme gods laughing. It was as though they were welcoming the birth of a new comrade. God! How can this be? I'm not willing, I'm not willing. The evil soul howled hoarsely. Countless evil lights flew out, penetrating the corpses floating in the sky above the setting sun peak. They swept up thousands of corpses and pulled them back, gathering together into an incomparably huge lump of flesh. Dende had returned to his divine seat. How could the evil soul, which had painstakingly cultivated for 10,000 years, endure this? It didn't have an evil body, so it forged another one. Since it could gather all Dharma into one, it could also refine 10,000 corpses into a body. With an evil body, it might not be impossible for it to become a god after Dende. The golden great apes, Pichu giants, the 4 barbarians, the war god guards, the phoenix race, and the other orthodoxy's disciples who had died in battle. Countless bloody corpses were stitched together, wriggling and twisting. Loud cracking sounds of bones being pieced together could be heard. The fragmented evil soul turned into smoke and hid among them, laughing maniacally. Looking from afar, there was a huge python formed from human corpses. Countless human heads had turned into python scales. It was terrifying and miserable. However, as the heavenly Tao's might pressed down, the nightmarish maniacal laughter came to a halt. The huge python formed from the corpses collapsed. Pieces of flesh fell to the ground and turned into floating light before dissipating. Boom! A shocking sound rang out. When the evil soul disappeared, Uncle Chong knew that the giant spirit in front of everyone had also disappeared. This caught the various monarchs off guard. They were all stunned on the spot. Chapter 1950. The giant spirit was destroyed along with the evil soul, and under its influence, Lei Ju also showed signs of abnormality. At this time, the evil aura surging around Lei Ju's body quickly thinned out, and his realm regressed. In the blink of an eye, he fell from the flawless Tharch realm back to the true self realm. As the disappeared thunder power rejuvenated, his temperament also changed faintly, as if he had returned to a normal person. The void was exceptionally quiet, and the sounds of fighting stopped everywhere. Pairs of eyes looked up at the sky above. As the evil aura suddenly dissipated, many people were puzzled. Did Dende win? At this time, Qin Hao's figure descended from the 9th heaven. His appearance did not change from before, and even his aura was not that oppressive, which made the Thearchs even more puzzled. Only Zhan Wu looked up at the setting sun battle god, who had lost one of his souls, and couldn't help but shed a tear. He had protected Qin Hao for 4 lifetimes, and had been forced to wander about. Finally, his long-cherished wish had come true. He knew that Qin Hao had returned to the divine throne. This was because he could sense the power of Dende's heavenly wheel through the honest battle scripture. Buzz! A layer of divine light descended. Before Zhan Wu could react, it swallowed the first palace master's thunder incantation. The surging light separated him from the sunset battle god. At this time, Qin Hao stood in the divine light, looking at Lei Ju with a calm expression. He slowly said, "Rushuang, Uncle Xiao, they are all outside. Now, is there any need to continue fighting between you and me?" Lei Ju's body trembled violently. He lowered his head and took a deep breath. He admitted, "Indeed, you have reached the apotheosis realm and control the heavenly Tao of the divine wilderness. Now, I am no longer qualified to compete with you." But Lei Ju raised his head and asked in the tone of an old friend, "How did you see the flaw and recognize me?" His disguise was flawless. "Is that important?" Qin Hao asked. Whether it was the black-robed Emperor Yuan's obstruction when he entered the divine palace, or the giant spirit breaking free and killing everyone just now, he immediately stopped attacking the northern frontier Thearchs just because of Face Like Cream's painful cry. All of this allowed Qin Hao to capture the human nature hidden deep within the Thunder Mantra. However, the main reason he could recognize it was because of the change in his realm. After stepping into the divine realm, his will had become one with the heavenly Tao. Every person and every living thing in the divine wilderness could be sensed by Qin Hao. This had nothing to do with the 10,000 spirit fire pupils. It was an extreme feeling. Haha, what are you going to do? Lei Ju asked calmly. I can't possibly keep you. Qin Hao answered directly, but I will convey the God's will to the world and commend all the forces that participated in this battle. Also, I will tell the world that Array Monarch Yen of the northern borderline died while searching for the array of the divine slaying. Ha ha ha! Lei Ju shook his head and laughed. He could understand that Qin Hao couldn't tolerate him. He had to give an explanation to the people who died in this battle. But the latter part of the sentence, Array Emperor Yen died for the evil slayer, it was equivalent to saying that the evil soul killed the evil soul, which was quite interesting. Lei Ju understood that Qin Hao made up this white lie to deceive the world for the sake of face like Cream's reputation. Phew! Lei Ju let out a long sigh and said, All right, you win. Xiao Yi really found a good son-in-law. Even I can't help but envy you. If I knew this would happen, I would have sent Rushuang to Qiutian town in western Liang before you regained consciousness. If he had trained Qin Hao to be his son-in-law, he wouldn't have had to fight with him today. Qin Hao was speechless. There's one more question. What is the apotheosis realm like? Don't worry, I won't cheat you. After this wish is fulfilled, I will disappear on my own. Lei Ju promised in the name of Array Emperor Yin. What is it like? Qin Hao seemed to be deep in thought, but he couldn't answer. He stretched out his hand, and a frail little blade of grass grew in the center of his palm. As divine light flashed in Qin Hao's eyes, the little blade of grass in the center of his palm suddenly bloomed, and a flower bud bloomed. This is the scenery of the divine path. Lei Ju frowned. His first thought was that Dendu would kill the grass in his hand. That was probably why he wasn't accepted by the heavenly path of the divine Baron. I hope you can always treat this godless land well. I have one last request. Lei Ju took a few steps forward and wanted to reach out his hand to pat Dandy's shoulder. However, he realized that it was inappropriate and tactfully said, Please, take care of my daughter. She is innocent, please. Who dares to offend the daughter of Emperor Xiao? Qin Hao asked. Even he couldn't offend her. Okay. The luckiest thing that happened to me in my life was meeting old Xiao. Lei Ju gazed outside through the divine light. He looked at the Alliance army in the north, trying to find Xiao Yi and face like Cream. But he was afraid that if he did, they would see him. Finally, he closed his eyes. After a long time, he slowly opened his eyes. Qin Hao, do you know that I will never lose unless I don't want to win? From now on, this place is up to you. After Lei Ju finished speaking, the sunset peak in the outside world shook. The entire peak began to collapse. Suddenly, a beam of light shot out from the peak. The peak suddenly split open. The speed of the light was extremely fast. Chapter 1951. The heavenly path of the divine wilderness allowed Qin Hao to see the origin of the evil. It wasn't the fault of the divine palace. From the beginning, the injustice of the mortal world was the root of the evil. The divine palace was only the trigger point. Qin Hao didn't know what kind of life Yen Laobei had experienced. He was oppressed by the rich, he wasn't recognized by the elders, his wife died of illness, or maybe he had encountered all kinds of misfortunes. But there was one thing, Yen Laobei had always kept the kindness in his heart. He always had a good heart for the world, but he hid this kindness and goodness in his bright red heart and buried it in the sunset peak. If not for this, Array Emperor Yen wouldn't have been separated by the evil soul and forcefully separated from Lei Ju from the evil soul. Because as long as Yen Laobei was there, the evil soul would always have that humanity. This was a kind of irony to the evil soul. The evil soul belonged to the extreme of evil. But Yen Laobei was a ray of light born in the abyss. Although his life was bleak, his light wasn't extinguished. Qin Hao recalled the past of the Divine Palace. Before entering the Seven Peaks, the evil soul that disguised itself as the black-robed Emperor Yuan in the Imperial Bay must have been influenced by Yen Laobei, which was why it repeatedly stopped him from entering the Divine Palace. Later, Yen Laobei could only give up and let the evil soul refine him. Unfortunately, both Array Emperor Yen and the evil soul underestimated Qin Hao. Plus, Muri's change gave Dendi a chance to escape from the Divine Palace. Whoosh! As the divine light dissipated, Qin Hao stepped out. He sighed in his heart. The divine desolate land should indeed change. Although the evil source had been destroyed, as long as the world was still unjust, 1,000 years later, or even 10,000 years later, it was hard to guarantee that a second calamity would occur. The place where evil was born was the human heart. Who is he? What did you say to him? Zhan Wu saw Qin Hao's worry. Could it be that he let Lei Ju go? What does it have to do with you? Qin Hao left Zhan Wu's side and walked towards the huge Empress throne. He had protected him for 4 generations. This kind of friendship was far beyond family. It was hard for him to repay him. However, this guy dared to call himself brother while he was still in a coma. He really deserved a beating. You remember everything? Zhan Wu's eyes flashed. He looked at Qin Hao's back, pretending to be cold and aloof. It was a familiar feeling from the primeval realm. A little. Qin Hao's laughter came back, and he was already on the throne. Han Lingxian had to deal with him. At this time, the ancestral lord, Feng Lan, Zhan Lang, Mu Yue, and many other unblemished experts and emperors surrounded Han Lingxian. Muri, who was using Xiao Han's body, held the Xiantian sword of the Xiantian celestial lord and stared coldly at Emperor Lingxian. Bao was there too. Han Lingxuan's appearance was very miserable. Both of her eyes were blinded, her long hair was messy, and her body was covered with wounds. Her noble imperial robe was torn to shreds, and she was waving her imperial whip around like a crazy woman. The whip's afterimages frightened Han Qingji so much that she didn't dare to move forward. Because of her special identity, the ancestral lord, Muri, and the others couldn't kill Emperor Lingxian directly. So, they waited for Qin Hao to deal with her. Qingji Han was Han Lingxuan's hidden trump card. At the critical moment, she suddenly burst out with the demonic I will, causing great trouble to the souls of Zhan Lang and the others. Except for Xinyue, the other 3 were severely injured. In fact, if Bao hadn't restrained the first princess of the East Continent to a certain extent, it would have been difficult for Muri to restrain her. Bao's spiritual attack was very fierce. Probably the divine item that Qin Hao left on her played a role. This girl wasn't afraid of Qingji Han's demonic eye of annihilation at all. Who dares to touch me? I am Emperor Lingxian, Denda's lover. The person he loves the most in his life is me. I will let him kill all of you, kill all of you. The crazy words mixed with the wind of the whip made the experts of the 5 realms feel a chill. As the gentle footsteps came, the crowd surrounding Han Lingxian automatically opened up a path. They watched as the calm Denda slowly walked forward. She's very dangerous. Muri cautiously stared at Han Lingxian, who was wildly swinging her whip. She reached out a hand to try to stop Qin Hao, and she said Xiao Han's voice. Qin Hao patted Xiao Han's hand, indicating that it was okay, and walked forward alone. Strangely, the moment Qin Hao approached, the crazy woman in the field suddenly quieted down. The sharp whip in her hand slipped, and she stared with empty eyes. She groped with her palms, and tears flowed down her face as she murmured, "Qin Hao, is it you? Qin Hao. I can't see you. I can't see you anymore. They blinded my eyes. It's me." Qin Hao reached out and held Han Lingxuan's blood-stained palms. "Qin Hao, you're back, sob, you're back." Han Lingxian threw herself into Qin Hao's arms and cried loudly. The experts of the four realms couldn't bear to look at her bloody and teary face. If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have done it in the first place. Han Lingxian had personally destroyed her beautiful life and the happiness she had. Qingji Han's body trembled slightly. She looked at the Empress, who had always been high and mighty. Even though she was the adopted daughter and the first princess of the East Continent, she was still like a servant with no status in front of Emperor Lingxian. She had never seen Han Lingxian cry, let alone throw herself into a man's arms and cry like this. It was simply unimaginable. But now, the incomparably powerful Empress of Daqin was crying blood and tears in Denda's arms like a little woman. She no longer had the slightest bit of Emperor's might. It was truly moving. Xiao Han watched from afar. Although she felt a little uncomfortable at first, she quickly adjusted. Qin Hao and Han Lingxian had known each other before her. She had also accompanied Dende through many ups and downs. Today, she had fallen to such a state and was not tolerated by the five realms. As someone who was about to die, she should be more magnanimous. Mu Yue's performance was also very quiet. She silently held Xiao Han's hand. She knew how much Qin Hao had loved Han Lingxian. It was once something she could only wish for. However, the amount of love he had in the past was the amount of pain in Qin Hao's heart now. Even though she had become Qin Hao's wife, Mu Yue could still stand from an objective point of view and feel great regret and pity for the fate between Han Lingxian and Dende. Is the evil soul dead? Han Lingxian raised her head and tried to speak in the gentle tone she used to accompany Dende. It's dead, Qin Hao said. My current appearance must be very ugly and frightening. She laughed. Even she felt that she was ugly. Lingxian, the sovereigns of the five realms are watching. I have to give the sovereigns an explanation. You should end your own life. Qin Hao let go of Han Lingxuan's hand. This was the last bit of gentleness he could give. Wait. Han Lingxian panicked. Like a little girl lost in the darkness, she hurriedly held Qin Hao's hand tightly. What other unfulfilled wishes do you have? I can help you, Qin Hao said. If I say, I want to stay by your side, will you still be willing? Han Lingxian said. Then, she lowered her head with a bitter smile. You are not willing. I have harmed you. I am not worthy, right? Great Emperor Lingxian, Dende has done his best. You only have yourself to blame. We have no time to listen to your words of love. Save yourself some dignity. Old Ancestor Haidong shouted. Who do you think you are? Han Lingxian stared in the direction of the voice with a pair of blood-red eyes. Although she had lost her eyes, Old Ancestor Haidong did not dare to look directly at her. He subconsciously shrank back. Haha, I only have myself to blame. I deserve it. Han Lingxian let go of Qin Hao's hand and tried hard not to cry. Qin Hao, have you ever loved me? Xiao Han's heart suddenly tightened. I used to love you. Qin Hao answered very straightforwardly. It was only in the past. Shameless. Bauer pouted, leaned forward, and scolded. Han Lingxian heard it and ignored it. She nodded and said, That's enough. Can you hug me again? The more Bauer listened, the angrier she became. Xiao Han shook his head at Bauer. I am a man with 2 wives and a daughter. Qin Hao said. Consider it a farewell between friends. Han Lingxian said. Qin Hao turned around and looked at Xiao Han and Vivian. The two did not say anything. Bao turned her head to the side, and her face was filled with displeasure. Fine. Qin Hao took a step forward and opened his wide arms. Whoosh! At that instant, a black light shot out from Han Lingxuan's mouth. It was filled with unblemished laws and shot toward the space between Qin Hao's eyebrows. Danger! This venomous woman! Haidong, White Emperor, and the others were startled. At such a close distance, Qin Hao's face was almost touching hers. Be careful. Xiao Han threw the profound heaven sword in his hand. It flew past Qin Hao's cheek and accurately pierced through Han Lingxuan's head. The sword ray flew past the back of her head. Qin Hao sighed and turned his head. She didn't want to injure me. After reaching the divine path, the evil soul could not even withstand a single palm strike from him. No matter how fierce Han Lingxian was, how could she injure a god like him? The moment she attacked, it melted under the heavenly Tao. Xiao Han came back to his senses, and his expression changed greatly. Han Lingxian's body fell to the ground. The lifeless immortal Emperor Lingxian had a look of regret on her face. She could die, but she didn't want to commit suicide. She wanted to die in Qin Hao's hands. She didn't finish her sentence. That year, before she returned from the God Burial Valley, she didn't betray the Pill Emperor. It was only after she returned with Zhan Wu that she was bewitched by the evil soul and forced to kill Zhan Lang's group of 4. However, Dendi would never hear her explanation. Dong. The Empress's body fell onto the huge, ice-cold throne with a loud thud. At this moment, the throne that stretched across the void started to disintegrate into specks of light due to Han Lingxuan's will of Wei dissipating. Qin Hao looked at the first princess of the East Continent and said, "Take her away." Han Qingji gritted her teeth and leaped forward. She picked up Great Emperor Lingxian's corpse and disappeared into the void. Dendi. Everyone was startled. He was digging up the roots of the problem. "I am the god of the heavenly Tao." Qin Hao turned around and faced the various thearchs. In an instant, his divine might was hard to resist. The incomparably resplendent heavenly wheel of the great Tao revolved around his imposing body. Under the divine radiance, the various thearchs were reduced to black and white. Chapter 1952. Guqin music flowed. Tao Sheng, the 9th island lord of Fenghua's 9th tribe, sat cross-legged in the air as he played the guqin. Beside him, Jiang Zhu, the 5th island lord, held her soul-suppressing orb in her left hand. Her right hand gathered monarch techniques and triggered a terrifying spiritual attack, trapping a Qin imperial city general in a golden robe. At this moment, the guqin music and spiritual attack combined and wrapped around Taihui's sacred lord, making it difficult for him to use his will. Yun Ro's flower-plucking hand shot forward. Her 5 fingers flew forward as she tried to crush Taihui's head. Swoosh! A battle spear fell from the sky and collided with the flower-picking hand's aura, shattering it into pieces. The number 1 general of the Qin imperial city, flawless Great Emperor Tiando, waved his hand and dispersed the guqin music and spiritual light that trapped Taihui, freeing him. "Let them go." Sword Master Zhenji Shouwuk flew over and stood in front of Yun Ro, Tao Sheng, and Jiang Zhu Island Lord. He looked at Tiando and Taihui. The evil calamity had been eliminated. Great Emperor Lingxian was dead. This battle was over. This was Denda's order. It was also the order of the heavenly way. Not only Tiando and Taihui, but everyone else in Qin Imperial City could leave. Anyone can leave, but not him. A brawny man dragged a lava stick with flowing lava and ran out of the North Territory Army. He was full of murderous intent and stared at Singang with bloodshot eyes. Singang smiled bitterly and sighed deeply. He said to the ape master, "All right, let's end this with this stick." He killed the ape ancestor. The golden great apes and the demon emperors would not let him go. Roar! The ape master let out a roar and took large strides towards Singang. As he ran, he revealed his giant ape form. It was as if a mountain had appeared out of thin air. Golden fur covered his entire body. The lava cudgel in his hand was like a mountain that came crashing down. Singang roared at the same time. He swept out thousands of stick shadows that merged into one. He swung out a black stick shadow that was 100 feet long and collided with the ape master. Boom! The air trembled violently, and the 2 staff shadows were destroyed at the same time. At this moment, an ape's palm that was covered in hair reached out and pressed down on Singang's head. As the ape master suddenly exerted force, it ignored Sengang's will of the way attack and crushed Sengang on the spot. Hao looked over. Ancestor was killed by Si San's father. Now. And Si San's father had killed Sengang. Let's stop here. He looked down at the remnants of the Qin imperial city from Tiando and said, "You have aided the evildoer in his evil deeds and should have been erased from the heavenly axiom. However, since you are acting under orders and have no choice, I will give you a chance to start over." After the Yuanling era, the four regions became devoid of God. Today, I have cultivated the divine path and have gained the recognition of the heavenly axiom. I will not let the divine path continue to be interrupted. Qin Hao's voice became more and more majestic. The heavenly way was dazzling. His will spread across the 5 realms and the 4 regions. His will appeared in every piece of land. Let's build the divine pavilion. Mortal martial artists can enter the divine pavilion and comprehend the divine decree. The divine pavilion will be controlled by the overlord orthodoxies. The war immortal guards will be called immortal guards. They will check all the candidates. Those who take advantage of the situation will be killed. When Qin Hao said this, his divine might fell directly on the great emperors of the orthodoxies. He wanted absolute fairness and justice. Even the supreme martial artists of the Alliance army, who had helped him in the war, could not casually stuff people into the divine pavilion. Building the divine pavilion. Establishing a divine orthodoxy. We can comprehend the divine decree. Gosh, we will all have the chance to become gods. Ancestor Haibi was so excited that his body trembled. Yes, God. The great emperors bowed respectfully. Dendi was the only one who could obtain the divine decree. All the great emperors would have the chance to become gods. Moreover, the divine pavilion was controlled by the various orthodoxies. Undoubtedly, the overlord orthodoxies would be the first to comprehend the divine path. Obviously, Qin Hao had given them a lot of convenience. However, there was one rule. Those who did not comprehend the emperor's path could not enter the divine pavilion. No one dared to take advantage of the situation. The immortal guards in charge of the assessment were not just for show. Tiando, are you willing to join the immortal guards and supervise the assessment of the divine pavilion in the Qin imperial city? Qin Hao looked over. I, Tiando, am willing to follow God's will and join the immortal guards. Tiando looked at Qin Hao for a long time. However, he did not see any threat in his eyes. If he left, Dendi would not make things difficult for him. However, Qin Hao had given him a chance to start over. He had even handed the assessment of the divine pavilion to him. How could he let him down? I, Tai Hui, am willing to follow God's will and join the immortal guards. Tai Hui knelt in the void with one knee in front of Qin Hao. Think carefully. I am not a divine guard for nothing. Since I have entered the divine pavilion, I have to brand my divine seal. Qin Hao said solemnly. I am willing. Tai Hui agreed before his brother. Good. Qin Hao's eyes flashed. An array of light was planted between Tai Hui and Tiando's eyebrows. Soon, the mark of the great void cauldron appeared between the eyebrows of the two brothers. It was exquisite and pocket-sized, like a blooming cinnabar. When the mark appeared, their temperament also changed, and an invisible force of divine decree was emitted. Aren't you giving your life to him? Tiando grumbled. Joining the immortal guards was to get a chance to enter the divine pavilion. Otherwise, they would not be able to enter. Who would have thought that Tai Hui would be so naive? Brother, you were not killed by the divine master, and you have become a true divine general. What is there to be unhappy about? Tai Hui said. Tiando immediately blushed. Chapter 1953. With the divine emblem imprinted between their eyebrows, Tiando and Tai Hui looked even more extraordinary. Their appearances were also more in line with the heavenly path divine generals. Moreover, through the divine emblem, they felt a strange connection with Qin Hao. It was as if they had obtained some kind of great power out of nowhere. This power flowed through their bodies, blood, will, and even their souls. It was boundless, majestic, and vast. Divine power. Tian Dou and Tai Hui looked at each other in disbelief. It felt so real. Under Dilly's control, this energy could move along with their will. They did not doubt that they could use it directly. Qin Hao smiled and said, "The divine emblem is not a shackle. It can also protect you and increase your strength. However, according to your Emperor's Path Foundation, you cannot rely on it too much." Since they had joined the Divine Guards, he would not mistreat them. Through the resonance between the divine emblem imprint and God's will, Tian Dou and Tai Hui could more or less comprehend some of the heavenly path's mysteries. However, using divine power in the body of an emperor was very taxing. Unless it was absolutely necessary, it was best not to use it. "Thank you, Divine Lord." Tai Hui was so excited that his body trembled. Being a divine guard seems pretty good. Tian Dou thought and nodded with satisfaction. It was as if his sense of existence had become even more superior. Let's disperse. The various orthodoxies have contributed greatly to eliminating the disaster in the divine wilderness. The divine pavilion will be handed over to you as a reward from the heavenly path. It is not easy to cultivate martial arts, and it is even harder to prove one's divinity. In the future, it will depend on your own luck. After 3 days, the Qin Imperial Palace will send a miracle. Qin Hao said, "Yes, Divine Lord." The emperors bowed and accepted the order. They were all very excited. The battle had ended. Streams of people left one after another. The 9 lineages of Phoenix Flower, White Moon Pavilion, Shua Clan, 7 heroes of the southern region, demons of Ape Island, and other forces were looking for their disciples who had survived the battle and were preparing to bring the injured back. However, at this moment, Qin Hao's gaze fell on the void in the distance. His divine consciousness covered the boundless space and seemed to see something strange happening there. He could not help but frown. "It's them." Zhan Wu also felt it, and he stared at God Burial Valley. The seal of the Devil region was loosening. Back then, during the Battle of the Gods, the souls of the foreign experts that were trapped by the 10 cutlass great demons were awakening one after another. They were breaking out of their seals. At this moment, Qin Hao's will descended upon the demonic domain with a single thought. He ignored the Yellow Springs Gate and appeared at the end of the demonic domain. Back then, the 7 thrones had formed an array formation, and the soul-suppressing demonic sword had been stabbed into the center. Since Zhou Wudao had pulled out the devil sword and lost the suppression of the devil weapon of 10 underworlds, as Zhan Wu had said, streaks of incomplete souls began to emerge from the cracked devil soil one after another. They transformed into soul lights that filled the sky and flew everywhere, passing through the gate of the underworld and heading towards the East Continent. These remnant souls from the outer realms sensed the aura of living people from the East Continent. Among them, they gathered into a huge torrent and headed straight for the Sunset Peak. Most of the martial emperors were here, and they wanted to possess someone and be reborn. "What's going on?" Heaven Do took a step forward and immediately blocked in front of Qin Hao like a loyal guard. His battle-thirsty eyes looked around. If he discovered any abnormalities, he would definitely kill those who dared to blaspheme the dignity of the gods in front of the Pill God. Now that he had joined the Divine Guards, Qin Hao was his Divine Lord. Blaspheming Qin Hao's dignity was equivalent to trampling on Heaven Do's dignity. He definitely couldn't tolerate it. "It's fine," Qin Hao said indifferently. Heaven Do's performance was pretty good. Following which, Qin Hao stretched out his hand and snapped his fingers. Buzz! A gust of heavenly Tao wind suddenly appeared and swept out crazily. When it flew out from the side of Heaven Do's body, it instantly turned into a boundless hurricane that engulfed heaven and earth. The flickering god power was extremely terrifying, and it seemed like it could tear the East continent into nothingness. One by one, the Emperor Lords looked at the hurricane with incomparable shock. This power was simply terrifying. However, they were very clear that Qin Hao hadn't used all of his power. Otherwise, even the heavenly Tao wouldn't be able to withstand it. The spiritual energy of the heavens would go berserk, and the heavenly Tao would collapse. It would definitely fall into chaos. How many years has it been? Finally, we have appeared. Warm light, gentle wind, such sweet spiritual energy. Damned divine desolate demon king, I want to slaughter all the living beings in this plane. Use their blood to welcome our new life, ha ha. Oh, what is that? God power. How is it possible? No! Savage words resounded throughout the sky, and in the end, they were drowned out by the hurricane. The souls that had been sealed in the demon realm for 10,000 years didn't welcome a new life. Instead, they were thrown into the abyss of death. Soon, the 10,000 souls that had been pressed into the demon realm by the 10-headed demons disappeared without a trace. Under the divine path, false gods and evil souls couldn't even withstand a single blow, let alone these nirvana realm and unblemished realm divine souls. Moreover, most of them were extremely weak. If gods hadn't been born, it would have been a headache for them to come out. Zhan Wu sneered and mocked, then turned his head. Where did he go? He went to the Qin imperial city. Lu said to the stunned sunset battle god. He truly ignored space and moved with a thought. Now, in this divine wilderness, there was no place that could stop Dendi. Or perhaps he should be called the alchemy god. 3 days later, at the Qin imperial palace. Don't be late. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Zhan Wu caught the experts of various orthodoxies and warned them sternly. Battle-intent particles filled the air and disappeared in front of the emperor's eyes. We didn't provoke him. Who could they find to reason with? The group of supremes of the 5 realms had inexplicably become punching bags. They didn't have the experience of winning, and it felt terrible. Chapter 1954. All the emperors returned to their sect and counted the casualties. Qin Hao wanted them to reorganize for 3 days. There must be a reason for that. As for the remnant souls from the outer region that had broken out of the barren island, Qin Hao had secretly resolved the crisis that was enough to throw the 5 realms into chaos. The emperors naturally did not know about it. The Battle of Sunset Peak ended. On this day, the scene of the apocalypse was deeply engraved in the hearts of the people of the East continent. However, at the same time, Denda proved his divinity, and his will descended upon the 4 regions and 5 realms. All the people and cultivators felt the appearance of the divine will. The barren mountains glowed with new life, and the spiritual qi between heaven and earth became more abundant. The sky was bluer than before, and the water was clearer. The filth in the world seemed to have been swept away overnight. Qin Hao controlled the heavenly path. Under the adjustment of the divine will, all living things were nourished. The deficiencies and flaws that existed in the past were repaired, and the heavenly path became more perfect and perfect. On this day, the people worshipped the divine position, burned incense, and sang praises to the gods. They prayed for the safety of their families and for the future of their children. The cultivation world was even more shaken. The warriors of the 4 regions were moved to tears. From now on, the imperial path was no longer a restriction. The divine wilderness had its own guardian deity. Qin Hao naturally felt the commotion in the outside world. Now, his divine will had merged with the heavenly path. Any change in the mortal world could appear in his divine will. To him, the people of the 4 regions were all children, and there was no distinction between them. Of course, birth, old age, illness, and death were part of the cycle of the heavenly path. He would not deliberately change or reverse it. What he could do was to create a better living space for all living things. This was the responsibility of a god. 3 days later. Qin Imperial City. The Imperial City had been successfully captured by the Western Liang army led by Qin Hao. A long time ago, Qin Hao had started to train an elite army. After he left, Hai Dafu had been in charge of this matter. From the selection of soldiers to the equipping of weapons and armor, the quality of the soldiers and the quality of the weapons were all top-notch. When the Xiliang army entered Daqin, Gongshu Jian's Mecha Legion made a great contribution. This steel force caught the other legions of Daqin off guard. The ancient mecha technique was very strong. As long as there were enough crystals, its power was much stronger than that of an ordinary army. When Xiaogua came back from the Divine Palace, he gave Gongshu Jian a new design plan. He used the giant mecha made of steel to replace the wooden mecha technique. Han Lingshuan's legion could not stop him at all. On the other hand, when they were besieging the Qin Imperial City, the defending army had put up a strong resistance. The mecha army had suffered heavy losses. If Song Ziyang hadn't saved him in time, Gongshu Jian would have died. In the defending army, although Han Lingxian did not leave behind the true self-Emperor's Dao, there were 2 extreme Dao validation experts. They were quite strong. No one around Qin Shilong could suppress these 2 extreme Dao validation experts. Only when Qin Yun and the others came to save the formation did they successfully break into the city. Fortunately, Xiao Han was cautious and asked Lian Han and Zhong Liqing to come together. Otherwise, it would not have been easy for Qin Yun and Yi Shuihan to break into the city. Even so, Zhang Yi was still severely injured. At this moment, in front of the vast buildings of the Imperial Palace, there was an extremely spacious field. In the past, this was the place where Qin Hao specially rewarded the generals of Daqin. After 600 years, the Imperial Palace had maintained its original appearance. Therefore, the field was still there. Today, as far as the eye could see, the field was filled with figures. The orthodoxies were lined up neatly in square formations. The lords of the 4 domains and 5 realms had come in person. The whole body exuded a majestic aura of millions of lions. However, no one was making a ruckus. There was no noise at all in the crowd. The atmosphere was abnormally quiet, and there was a strong sense of solemnity and solemnity. In the southern domain, Qilin Dao Sect, Water Jade Palace, Vajra Court. The Dao Ancestor and Buddha Dharch were in the front. In the northern domain, Phoenix Flower 8 Lineages Island Lords and Ape Island's Demon Races leaders were Paragon Feng Lan and Father of Sea Sand, Ape Lord. In the middle domain, Juying Sword Palace, White Lunar Pavilion, Judgment Hall. In the western domain, the Warring States Kim people and the Poison Dao Miao people had all arrived. In the eastern domain, Jixia Academy's Tai A 4 Palaces, 7-Star Herb Court, Eastern Seas Shua Clan. The 7 heroes of the southern domain, the Shao and Qi Thearchs of the northern border, and the Western Liang army were guarding the periphery of the field. It was a magnificent sight. Early this morning, the lords of the orthodoxies had brought their disciples and waited here for a long time. Everyone outside is here. In the imperial palace, the sunset battle god spoke to Dendi. Qin Hao looked helplessly at Zhan Wu, not knowing what to say. The sunset battle god had ordered the 5 realms patriarchs to come to the imperial palace before dawn. They had been standing here until now. In fact, there was no need for them to be so anxious. Let's go, Qin Hao said and took the lead to walk out, side by side with the sunset battle god. Behind them, Tian Dou, Zhan Lu, Zhuge Xiu, and Zhan Lang followed. They were all unblemished experts. Greetings to the Supreme Divinity, Sunset Battle God. As soon as Qin Hao and Zhan Wu appeared, their voices reverberated throughout the vast arena, shaking the heavens. Everyone bowed slightly to show their respect. Now, Dendu represented the heavenly path of the divine wilderness and was the god of all living beings. In the battle against evil, the orthodoxies fought with me. Today, besides handing over the divine pavilion seal, there are some things that you must do. Qin Hao stood above the imperial palace and spoke in a clear voice. We will do our best to fulfill the orders of the divine will. Emperor Bai, Ocean Destroyer, and the others said respectfully. Qin Hao smiled and shook his head. No, this is not for you to do. I will do it. This. Ocean Destroyer did not understand. What did the divine will need to do personally for the matters of the world? If the divine will had to do all the trivial things, they would be useless. If this matter were to spread to other planes one day, people would laugh at the incompetence of the divine wilderness emperor path. The seal of the 14 primordial spirit gods had not been lifted yet, but Ocean Destroyer Ancestor had already thought of other planes. This old man was very far-sighted. Listen quietly, Emperor Bai whispered. The alchemy god's arrangements naturally had his reasons. If he spoke too much, he would be thrown out by the sunset battle god. I understand your thoughts. As the ruler of the heavenly path, it is impossible for me to do everything personally. In the future, I will not interfere in the mortal world. However, this is something that you cannot do. Qin Hao said. Divine will, resurrect the souls of the dead in the battle against evil. Zhan Wu shouted solemnly. Chapter 1955. Souls of the Dead. Resurrection. These 4 simple words instantly silenced the Imperial Palace's martial arts arena. Resurrection was a combination of thousands of beautiful things, carrying infinite hope and possibilities. The past could only be imagined and hoped for. Today, Qin Hao performed a miracle to bring the dead back to life. The emperors were speechless. It was indeed a miracle, and they could not do it. Qin Hao looked down calmly. At this moment, his body was filled with noble divine light. His will merged with the heavenly axiom, and he was the heavenly axiom's incarnation. He raised his hand and swept out a dazzling brilliance. Suddenly, the heavenly axiom's power descended upon the imperial palace's martial arts arena. Transparent souls were born in the open space, and as the divine power condensed, they gradually became corporeal. Soon, the silhouettes of the bodies became clearer and clearer, until they became the most familiar faces of the orthodoxies. Buzz. An enormous body that was as majestic as a mountain was the first to release a powerful aura of life. Divine light soared into the sky and enveloped the entire area. The giant ape ancestor, who had fought the Pichu giant and Valley Master Shenong before being killed by Tsengang with a single strike, slowly opened his ape eyes. Then, Meng Xiang, who was attacked by Jin Chen and Yun Ro, as well as Zhou Wendi's sneak attack, appeared after the ape ancestor. Gu Che, the armored god of war guards, and the emperors of the 5 realms who died in the battle were all born in the divine light. Their souls were recovered from the heavenly axiom, and their bodies were condensed by Qin Hao's divine power. They appeared in the martial arts arena alive, and countless people could not help but scream. I'm still alive? The ape ancestor spoke the first sentence after his resurrection. He looked at the millions of people in a daze. Meng Xiang, Gu Che, and many other emperors in the martial arts arena had the same expression as the ape ancestor. They felt that it was unreal. However, as Si San's father wailed and knelt down heavily in front of Qin Hao, this illusion was completely shattered. Only then did the revived people wake up with a start and realize that they were indeed alive. My God! The great Golden Ape Clan leader, the future master of Ape Island, and all the demon sovereigns knelt on the ground and cried like a child. During the shocking battle at Sunset Peak, they were forced to rely on Qin Hao in the final tribulation. But now they were completely convinced by the divine path. God. Many emperor lords knelt down. He was a true god. Qin Hao had single-handedly reversed the heavenly Tao and brought his family, teachers, friends, lovers, and disciples back to their side. He did not neglect the living and gave them a complete person. Qin Hao nodded slightly. At this moment, the divine light on his body became even more dazzling. He could clearly feel that the power of faith of all living beings had become even more intense. Vaguely, his celestial wheel was also undergoing some kind of change. After retrieving the fragmented memories of his first life, Qin Hao knew that his realm was rising to a higher level. The so-called divine Tao of the mortal world was actually also a realm. It was stronger than the Emperor Tao, but it was still far from being a true god. Perhaps only the god-kings of the primeval realm were worthy of being called the true gods of the primeval age. Qin Hao waved his sleeve, and another wave of divine light fell down. One after another, the bodies of the dead returned to the field of vision. The dead disciples of the various orthodoxies, the warriors of the Phoenix God Clan, and the Proud God Clan. Tens of thousands of dead people lined up neatly in a square formation. The aura of death faded away, and their vitality was reignited. Every time the divine light covered the area, countless people would return. Following this, every time the disciples of the White Lunar Pavilion, the Shua clan, and the Juying Sword Palace returned, the elders and emperors of the various sects knelt before Qin Hao. Gradually, more and more people appeared. The spacious martial field was no longer sparse, and it was even a little crowded. When the Sea tribe and the Pichu giants appeared, a huge commotion broke out in the square formations of the orthodoxies. The atmosphere became tense in an instant. The flow of people separated like a tide, and the Sea tribe was divided into two areas. Waves of divine light raged from the various forces. They were in a tense standoff with the Sea tribe. If Qin Hao was not present, a fierce battle would have broken out in the next second. Supreme God, our people have been revived. Why did you let the Sea tribe come back? Emperor Bai said loudly. It was not a question, but a question. Everyone, be careful of them. The demon lords of Ape Island looked at the tall and burly Pichu giants with one eye and crooked mouths. These ugly and smelly lowly races did not deserve to live in the divine wilderness. Especially the Golden Great Ape tribe, as if they were the natural enemies of the Pichu tribe. Their hair stood on end, and they were glowing with a blinding light. They had entered battle mode and were about to transform into their demon forms. The Pichu tribe and the Sea tribe were the same. At first, they were confused. Then, they stared nervously at the various orthodoxies and sects of the East continent. They protected the weak in the center of the formation, and many sorcerers began to chant spells. Silence. Qin Hao uttered calmly. His majestic divine might descended, suppressing the battle intent of the orthodoxies and the people of the four barbarians. Divine light flowed across the arena like a stream of water, flowing from one figure to another. Everyone's tense hearts were calmed down inexplicably. They felt incomparably comfortable under the divine light. However, many pairs of eyes were looking at Qin Hao, waiting for an answer. The Sea tribe and the Pichu tribe are the same as you. They are all living beings of the heavenly path of the divine wilderness. No matter what, you can't erase this fact. Qin Hao said. But Ocean Destroyer had something to say. During the primordial spirit era, the barbarian god was one of the 14 great gods of the human race. The Sea tribe and the Pichu tribe were his people. In order to fight against the extraterritorial powerhouses, he gave up immortality and scattered all his divine power to seal and protect the continent for 10,000 years. That's why the divine wilderness was peaceful for 10,000 years, and why you are here today. Even if it's for the barbarian god, you should give the Sea tribe and the Pichu tribe some space to live. In the battle of exorcism, the heroic deeds of the Sea tribe and the Pichu tribe moved Qin Hao. Like the other orthodoxies, they only wanted to not be wiped out by the turbulence of the divine wilderness. They wanted to fight for a chance of survival for their descendant. For this, they were willing to give it their all. The Sea tribe and the Pichu giants were all killed in battle. Compared to the other orthodoxies, their loyalty was something that many people could not compare to. We don't want our descendants to be slaves when they are reborn. Dendi occupied the East continent and took away our home. He is guilty to us. Give us land anywhere in the world. We will leave the East continent and never appear in front of you again. A middle-aged man with a rather strong physique and a tuft of grass-like hair on his head stepped out. He faced the martial arts field and looked straight at the god with an unyielding gaze. This man was the tribe leader of the 4 barbarians. His cultivation was at the peak of true self. Behind him stood a Pichu giant, whose body size was comparable to the ape ancestor. It was breathing heavily from its nose and glaring at Qin Hao. 3 days ago on the battlefield, it was this giant and the lord of Shennong Valley who had restrained the ape ancestor. It was from the Pichu tribe. The Pichu giants were not good at communicating with people. Although the East continent was big, only the Sea tribe understood their thoughts. Wherever the Sea tribe went, the Pichu tribe would follow. If they had to die, they would die together. Even if it was a god, they still dared to resist because they also had a god in their hearts and believed in the barbarian god. There is a wasteland in the middle of western Liang and northern borderline. The environment there is primitive. Although it is not as beautiful as the East continent, in my opinion, it is more suitable for the Sea tribe and the Pichu tribe to live in. You will like it there, Qin Hao said kindly to the middle-aged man. 600 years ago, he had killed several emperors of the Sea tribe, occupied their land, and established the Daqin Empire. There were indeed places that he could not handle well. Now Qin Hao was in charge of the Way of Heaven. His state of mind was naturally different from that of the Way of Emperor. It could be considered as making up for it. Moreover, the wasteland was not small. Puyang Shaojun and Puyang Shaolei could not manage it. Letting the Sea tribe and the Pichu tribe go there would be beneficial for the development and prosperity of the wasteland. Are you willing to migrate? Qin Hao asked. Thump, thump. The Pichu giant patriarch gently punched the middle-aged man's shoulder with his fist. Although he controlled his movements very gently, the middle-aged man still slipped and staggered. The middle-aged man understood the giant's intention and nodded. We are willing to migrate and never come to the East continent again. The people of the East continent despised them, but so did they. Since they could get rid of their hatred, they were naturally willing. All right. Qin Hao nodded and faced the orthodoxies. Do you have any objections to this arrangement? No. Emperor Bai said. We respect God's will. The ape master glanced at the Pichu giant. Of course, it was good for these big guys to leave. Since both sides agree, I will send the Sea tribe and the Pichu tribe away. Qin Hao slowly raised his hand. Wait. Wait. A deep and rough voice rumbled. The Pichu tribesman's speech was shaky. His huge body walked past the middle-aged man and carefully came to the front of the imperial palace. He stood in front of Qin Hao. Then, the giant knelt down on one leg and extended his rough hand to Qin Hao. Qiu Wu is willing to be branded as a divine servant and become a divine servant of God. At this moment, Qiu Wu looked at Qin Hao with a complicated gaze. He had experienced Qin Hao's era of conquest and saw his elders being suppressed by Dendi. Logically speaking, he should hate Qin Hao. However, now that the Pill Emperor had proven his divinity, not only did he revive them, but he was also willing to provide a living space for the descendants of the Bichio clan. That was that. Enmity was enmity and kindness was kindness. To show their sincerity, the Bichio clan should do something. They believed in the ancient barbarian god, and could not believe in a second god. However, as the patriarch, Qiu Wu was willing to be Qin Hao's divine servant. This had nothing to do with the tribe. It was his own intention. He served Qin Hao and still believed in the barbarian god. It did not go against his original intention. Are you serious? Qin Hao smiled. He felt that Chiu Wu was quite interesting. The patriarch of the Pichu tribe was his divine servant. What was the difference between him and the entire Pichu tribe obeying Dendi? Chiu Wu was repaying his kindness. Yes, I am serious. Chiu Wu raised his head and his eyes shone with sincerity. All right. Qin Hao pointed his finger forward and a divine light shot out. The divine cauldron was branded on Chiu Wu's chest. At this moment, his will and Chiu Wu's soul were immediately connected. In that case, I will also plant the divine light of the alchemy god. The four barbarians' middle-aged man raised his head and knelt down on one leg. The four barbarians and the Pichu tribe were together. Qin Hao did not waste any time and also planted a divine halo on the four barbarians' tribe leader's chest. His divine will formed a connection with the other party's soul. Then, his eyes flickered and the four barbarians' tribe and the Pichu tribe disappeared from the sight of the orthodoxies. When the four barbarians and the Pichu giants reappeared, they had already landed on the wasteland and were scattered across the territories of the three aristocratic families. Puyang Xiaojun had also received Qin Hao's instructions to settle the two tribes down. Are you satisfied? Qin Hao asked the people below. Ha ha ha! The sovereigns of the orthodoxies laughed in unison. Then, they realized that it was inappropriate and immediately stopped laughing. Feng Lan would like to ask the supreme divinity. You are willing to revive the Pichu giants and the four barbarians, but why is there no sign of my Fenghua Wuhuang? Autarch Feng Lan shouted. In the battle of Evil Slayer, Wuhuang's lineage was killed by the giant spirit. The island lord, the elders, and the disciples were all cut off. Fenghua Wuhuang lost all 8 lineages. Although there were some unfortunate people who had died in the chaos, at least the Moro tribe was not left alone and there was still hope for revival. I see. The cultivators of the various orthodoxies nodded, as if they had figured something out. The higher the expectations placed on Qin Hao, the greater the divine power Qin Hao would receive, and the greater the feedback effect would be. Turned out that during the ancient elemental era, the believers left behind by the 14 great gods in the mortal world were not a bunch of blind lunatics. Understanding this, the orthodoxy's faith in Qin Hao became even stronger. Who wouldn't want their lives to be strong? If the monarch were to accidentally die one day, perhaps their sincerity towards God would move Qin Hao. In that case, a second revival would not be impossible. Although Qin Hao had said that he would no longer interfere with the mortal world and that the divine wilderness would still operate according to the original rules, an incomparably loyal believer was still very precious to God, wasn't it? In that case, Supreme Divinity, please revive my disciple, Sikong Shu. Feng Lan said. Sikong Shu had been killed by Zhan Yi and died in the same way as the other orthodoxies. This should work. I almost forgot about this. Qin Hao smiled and nodded. Reviving Sikong Shu was not difficult. Qin Hao's eyes were hazy with golden divine light. His thoughts entered Feng Lan's mind out of thin air. As Feng Lan's body suddenly trembled, a dazzling divine light wrapped around a soul appeared in front of him. Soon, under the condensation of divine power, the illusory soul solidified. Sikong Shu, who was covered in divine aura, returned to the side of Feng Lan's master. Master! Sikong Shu was slightly stunned. Wasn't she dead? Little Shu. Feng Lan suddenly burst into tears. She opened her arms and hugged Sikong Shu. A disciple that she had taught was equivalent to half a daughter. In the distance, among the divine guards standing on both sides of the imperial palace, Zhan Yi, who was in charge of guarding the martial arts arena, smiled and looked at Qin Hao with gratitude. The revival ceremony has ended. May the monarchs of the orthodoxies come forward to receive the divine seal of the divine pavilion. Zhan Wu said solemnly and loudly. Whoosh! the Great Elder, Feng Lan, Hyun Ing, Wuk, Trampling the Sea, Li Xiuxing, Holy Emperor Jiang. The sovereigns of the 4 regions and 5 realms came forward and stood respectfully in a row, facing Qin Hao above. With the divine seal and the divine pavilion, I hope that you will do your best to cultivate more talents for the divine wilderness and prosper the martial arts of the 4 regions. If there is anyone who has successfully comprehended the divine decree, I will gladly welcome them. Qin Hao laughed heartily,